What's up, Snake Joe? Welcome to the chat. Glad to see you this week.
Thanks to Alger. Something, man. Yeah, that's awesome. It sounded like underwater aquarium noises or something, because your mic must be close to your keyboard. Not that it matters, you know. We're not thinking. Just I was like, what the hell is that? Come on, you.
Uh-oh.
Mario paints, everyone singing. Mario paints, I hope you're bringing the mustache that comes with Mario paints. Mario paints.
Welcome to the chat, Ludicrous. So Snake Jones, if you're on the road, keep your eyes on the road. Untitled Pictureshow, drive safely.
These songs so many times that my brain like tries to anticipate the next one like it was an old album, you know, like listening to Alice in Chains Dirt or something, you know. It's kind of hanging. I just tried to squeeze in some talk in there so that you can do it, YouTube. You got this. I need to put these tracks on a different player. What's up, Gray Moon? Welcome to the chat. So what song do you think is going to be next, SB?
and a guide to remember. Real Rx Only Pictureshow hours. What's up, man? American? Got a new definitely a guide to remember.
Hey, come on.
Another frog flying coming in the soup jet. Another frog, I wanna put it in a watermelon frog. Not another frog. Another frog coming flying in the soup jet. Flying close and coming hiding in the soup can. Another frog, it doesn't have a lot of money.
Make it easy.
Frog
Make it
coming
easy.
flying in the soup jet. Another frog and she's kissing with the missile. Not a frog, not a frog, not another frog again. Not another frog again. Not another frog in the soup jet. Frog in the soup jet. Not another frog again. Not another frog in the soup jet. Frog in the soup jet. Not another frog again. Not another frog in the soup jet. Frog in the soup jet. Not another frog again. Not another frog in the soup jet. Frog in the soup jet. Another frog in the soup jet. Coming in the zone with the suitcase. Everybody coming running. Not another frog again. Not another frog in the soup jet. Frog in the soup jet. Not another frog again.
I usually like to say bless you. I do sometimes. I don't have any authority to bless anyone, so Gesundheit works.
It's German.
You look
Mean-
it up.
Means health.
Oh, Gesundheit. That'd be a good greeting then, I guess. They,
Oh,
on Gesundheit.
yeah, it's just health. It's kind of a weird thing to say to someone who just sneezed.
Also, just what? Gesundheit came up with a word for health also. There's cross in there.
That was close. Did I miss anything? What happened?
Health.
Help?
Yeah, I sneezed and Jim said health at me. He said health in German.
Does it just mean help?
I don't know, I was looking and it just kept saying health all over the place.
Yeah.
I
Literally.
say because of this.
We have spent so many hundreds of
We
dollars,
start a new
and if we
practice
got
of
it
assertively
back,
saying help to someone when they
we
sneeze.
would probably just wait.
Yeah, that's what I was just thinking. You know, someone
And when we
Or
die,
you could say,
sneezes, you go health.
Help!
help,
Help! 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 I like this one.
for the next 100,000
yeah, if it was good health, it'd be gut Gesundheit.
we die.
Gesundheit.
Gut Gesundheit.
Turn us into rocks, and we'll stay alive for the next 100,000 years.
Alright. So you guys all good to go in about a minute and a half here?
I'm ready whenever you guys are.
Alright.
I'm ready when you are.
So when this song is over, we will push the button.
What about you all on TV land? You all ready? Internets?
Yeah, push 1 to go live at the end of this song and press 2 to wait 4 more songs.
I'm gonna wait one more song, then press 7.
'Cause when we die, we're gonna
Health, Sean, health.
Help! Help me out, you guys.
That's the secret cure. You just have to yell health at each other, and that's how people get healthy.
Duh. People say God bless you. I say He is. He's blessing me. Don't you worry. All right.
Somebody said there's a virus called the EE virus, confirmed in Connecticut. You guys heard of that?
No.
Is that equestrian virus? It's in
Alright,
deer and
now,
horses.
Let's talk about viruses where everyone can see us. Welcome to Picture Show number. Which number, Jim?
59.
59 times we've been doing this. And please help us welcome our returning guest, Stephen Sorensen, who is becoming quite the expert in new chronology and similar information relating to new chronology. We had him on, I don't remember which episode, but it was great. And we thought this week it would be awesome to have him back and just kind of poke our heads in on where he's at, find out what he's been working on. So, welcome, Stephen.
Thanks for having me back. Sort of last minute, so we're just gonna have to wing it.
Yeah,
I'll do everything to the best of my ability and try and get the facts right, but I don't have any material prepped. It's actually interesting. This person just mentioned this equine encephalitic virus. We've got that in Michigan too. I think it's confirmed. I think a couple of people have died from it even.
Yeah, that's what we were talking about, the viruses. So
I wonder if it's one of those government manufactured viruses that they accidentally released.
I wonder that too. Ever since I read about that, I've always wondered, is this mosquito one of them?
yeah, right? That's what it makes you do. You're like, is this like just a regular mosquito, or is this one of these, like they shook it out of a little jar somewhere, like, and now they're doing math, like, well, we'll see how many people get it, and then we'll have ourselves a little database, right?
Yeah. I think they use robot birds to transport EEE carrying mosquitoes around the country.
Nice. So you're into the birds aren't real theory, Jim? I didn't know that.
Birds aren't real.
There's no evidence.
No evidence.
Of birds, yeah, almost none at all.
Show me a bird. You can't.
Next thing you know, Steven's going to be trying to tell us that snow is black, ladies and gentlemen.
It is.
It's all white. Snow is black.
Yeah, I remember last time you came on, dude. That's that someone in the chat was like, "Come on," or maybe it was a comment afterwards, like, "That's where I part ways," and I'm like, he must not have got it, Like,
Yeah.
he didn't realize.
I don't know.
That's how you see white, is if something's.
You might
black.
disagree with it, If you don't believe in deductive reasoning, people deny birds exist. You could easily deny deductive reasoning exists. What is that even? Deducing things?
Oh man. So
How do you come to that conclusion?
So, now well, by deductive reasoning. So now you're. No, this is your denial is a circular fallacy. So what was the first comment right before we pushed the button about viruses? How did we get into that? How did we start talking about viruses? I missed it.
Someone was wondering about the triple E virus and whether or not it is a legitimate concern or just fear propaganda.
Well, I would say if you're seeing it in the media, it's very likely just fear propaganda. If you're hearing about a terrible illness that 3 or 4 or 5 people locally are really sick and or dying from, and you can confirm through their relatives or through knowing them personally that they're sick, then I'd say it's a genuine concern. Would you guys agree with that line of thinking?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
And that
It's either that or a salad bar at Applebee's with bad spinach.
Yeah. Oh, that's another thing I wonder. Do you think they're contaminating some of the crops with E. coli? Because it seems pretty consistent. Like, that like the spinach seems like a pretty consistent thing in the last few years, and it seems like there's at least 2 other things that have been getting E. coli on them, and it makes it all the way out into the population. So
I know that one of the biggest E. coli outbreaks in our country was caused by a woman in a cult in Oregon. She was poisoning salad bars with E. coli.
oh yeah, we were talking about that when I was on vacation, because that they like. It's like, oh, what's the guy's name? They made a huge cult over here in Oregon. They like took over a whole town, and the complex is still there. I don't know if there's any cult members still active over there, but yeah. And that was like the first act of like bioterrorism in United States recent history or whatever.
Apparently, she was acting on her own and not by the orders of the cult.
Yeah, the cult thing was unrelated. She just happened to be.
I wish that we could say that that's not the way they present things, but geez, is it ever the way they present things? You know, this woman's involvement with a cult has nothing to do with her deciding to try and massively reduce the population in her local area, so that the cult numbers grow to be more than the actual population of, you know, 100-mile radius. Or I know that was her plan. Everybody knows that had to be her plan, right?
Oh yeah. I guess she was sweet on the leader. She was trying to impress him or something, or win some good.
I did this for you.
Yeah, that's terrifying. That's just terrifying.
Well, I just heard in the chat that you're up to 777 subscribers, SB.
All right, on the YouTubes.
Yeah, on the YouTubes.
Yeah, somebody screen cap it and we'll make it into like a casino meme or something.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I took a screenshot.
Cool. All right, so we got 19 folks here. So I'm just gonna glance down here. And is there something super exciting that you found recently that you think just needs to be brought to the forefront right away, Stephen, on the new chronology research? Anything that's just like itching you to get it out first?
Yeah, we could pull up some stuff. I guess I don't know where we left off last time on talking about stuff. It was a while ago that I was on the show.
Yeah.
So I've definitely done a lot since then. When do you know off the top of your head when that show was, or?
Oh, I know.
It was like earlier this.
It's got to
one
be
that we
year, maybe in like February or
Can look.
March.
Yeah, that seems right, February or March. And I do remember that we started to get into trying to compare new chronology to Mud Flood a little bit. And I don't know if I've seen some of those videos because they pop up in my feed because I've clicked enough of John Levy and other similar videos. And I find them fascinating, but I don't have the same... I guess I know the new chronology stuff a little bit better, so it makes it easier for me to keep an interest in it. Whereas the Mud Flood stuff, I'm not saying that it doesn't have some validity. It seems like the architecture, the way all that architecture stuff is a trip. Do you still kind of side by side keep track of both, or are you just focusing only on the more Fomenko type line of study?
Well, mudflood stuff falls under geology, so I still keep it in mind for when I'm looking into stuff, but it's not at the forefront of my research.
Right.
I think that there is a lot of hype about mudflood that is based more on fantasy and hope of something greater than what's there, but I also think that definitely the mudflood stuff is worthy to look into, because it is something that happens, and it's really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like the way that it came out, it really reminded me of Flat Earth, the way that it all suddenly got brought out and it's in all of your algorithms. So that always makes me suspicious of it. Not that, I find it fascinating, but like you said, it seems like they show a bunch of stuff and they don't speculate. They kind of speculate to a purpose or to an end. Talking about ancient technology, especially Antiquitech, they call it. Have you heard that word they coined? Antiquitech?
What?
They
Your mic cut out.
they coined this word like antiquitech, talking about their theorizing of the free energy technologies, and so
Oh yeah,
it seems
yeah.
like
It's a lot of speculation, right?
yeah. And so I kind of enjoy that about your work, especially that it's not that you're afraid to speculate. You'll still speculate, but you're the only guy I found that's really just doing consistent documenting what the process you're going through. I know that you had read two of Fomenko's books when we talked last, I think, and I assume that you're way beyond that now just from watching the stuff you post on Facebook and whatnot.
I had read a lot more than just two last time we talked.
Okay.
I had read through the 7-volume series and the two volume mathematics and statistics thing, and a couple books from the How It Was in Reality series.
Wow, I'm sorry. Yeah, I totally misremembered all that.
Prior to going and trying to find people to talk to about it, and then after all that, definitely starting up my website. I had already kind of reviewed a lot of the paper, and I wanted to sort of get a online database that was public for people to be able to follow up with it and sort of correct me where I'm wrong if I'm wrong. So far, I haven't had any argumentation against it because it's all on point with just about everything else that's out there. So I'm just still digging through the material. I just have recently saved up enough money for a computer. So I'm hoping, I'm still saving it up money, but I'm just about having enough to get it. So I'm hoping the first week of October, I'll have that up and running. I'll start making a lot more YouTube videos. I know you said you had been trying to find some of my talks on new chronology, and I'm going to put up a ton of videos on YouTube. I learned how to build computers, and I'm going to build a computer just strictly for video editing. So I'm going to edit a bunch of videos and put them out there to I'm going to do a bunch of videos that are under 4 minutes so that you can kind of get snippets of information that will prepare you for a longer talk. Because you can get a lot of information out in 4 minutes.
Yeah,
so
that sounds
that's
great.
Kind of where.
Man. That sounds great. I'm really excited to see.
Digestible chunk too.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see that because I think, like I said, I think you're the only guy that's coming from the strict. I would call your angle strict. You're kind of sticking to the original research and not getting digressed off into other things. And I'm excited to see it keep going, man. I'm sorry that I when we talked last, I intended to sign up for $20 a month, so I've been thinking about that really hard, and I don't know if I can commit to $20 every month, but I was thinking to just kick you $100 when I can, save up $100, and that way, and maybe like give a specific text or a specific idea to get information about, like we talked about right before we went live. I mentioned the Apocrypha, and I was thinking of like the Gnostic scriptures and the grimoires, and maybe some of the Jewish mystical texts like the Sefer Yetzirah. Have you ever heard of that book?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. So maybe that's what I'll do. I'm gonna get, when I have $100, I'll kick it your way, and maybe if you just want to look at something like that, and then whatever amount of time you can dedicate based on that money, if you're still doing it, are you still doing that where you take money to go ahead and write an article?
Man, even if you had $20, that'd help out a lot, So whenever you have money that you can spare, I'm more than happy to help out with what I can. But also, just suggesting it. If you bug me enough in my inbox, eventually I'll go and look at it. So that's another way to try and get me to do content. Just bug me a bunch. And...
I would feel bad. Just so you know, folks, what I mean is that one of Steven's things that he does is he's got a Patreon, and the Patreon's in the description for this show. So we encourage you, of course, to go and sign up if you can, and support his work, because he's doing important work about the history, the timeline of history, and how it's very potentially wrong, like pretty close to 100% wrong from what we've been told.
So what I'm doing is a critical study into chronology to place down the facts, because what I want to to note when I went into looking for this, it wasn't collected yet or organized at all. So I'm still spending just countless hours trying to figure out what has happened, who recorded what and where, and boiling it down into a really simple formula, I guess, for people to digest. To say right here is when and where, we came up with the idea of Proto-Indo-European languages and stuff. It's common topic in linguistics, and I think that was the 18th or 19th century that idea was concocted. But stuff like that. So on my Patreon, I have an option where you can sign up for $1 a month, and that lets you see I do update videos on the first and third Sunday of every month to kind of catch everyone up on what I'm doing, what I'm studying, what's up with chronology truth in the background, not all the stuff that's up front for people to see, but more so kind of what's in the works. And then I've also got a $20 subscription that Sean was just talking about I would do an article for you each month. So you pick a topic and I'll go and I'll check it out and I'll write up a paper about it to kind of explain it a little bit more. That way you can kind of get information that you want, but it also puts down a base for everybody else. They can also see it to be able to get that info too. I think, I don't know what the study was where this saying came up from, but it was something like if you got a question in class, there's like one or two other kids or something that also have that question, or I don't know how many it is, but I figure, if I've got these questions, somebody else has got to be asking some of this stuff. And it's just kind of weird that there's not a whole lot of people looking into it. It turns out that history really is one of those things that almost is the way that some people regard Jesus Christ as a complete myth. There's no possible way in existence he could have existed. He's just based off of other myths. Some of those ideas are popular. I'm starting to adopt them for some of the figures of history that other people would say, well, no, definitely Julius Caesar was a real person.
Right.
Or Nero was definitely real. He definitely watched Rome burn. We know about him from 14th century manuscripts.
Yeah, well, Charlemagne's another famous one that people just assume Charlemagne's definitely a real guy, but the little bit of digging that I've done, it looks like he's just a manufactured character,
I don't know if I put this quote up or if I ever snagged it from the article I was reading, but it says that there's not a single piece of writing that survives from Charlemagne's time, and that everything we know about him is from people from much later that wrote about him.
Yeah,
But I could be wrong about that.
That's probably right, though, because that's probably the most stunning thing that I would take away from all of these chronology studies is that the documents that we do have, not only are they not very old at all, like most of them are, the older ones are from like the 1700s, and like what would you say, like a few from the 1600s? Is there anything you could guarantee?
So the majority of manuscripts are after the 1300 mark, but there are some that have been dated as early as like the 800s or 900s on our traditional timeline. And then with papyrology and studying papyrus, they try to use radiocarbon dating to say some of those are actually the oldest and they're from around the year 0 or the year 100 or prior to that.
Right, but that's most of the history we're leaning on is really the manuscripts of most things we think about in history really aren't very old at all. Like, I'm sure we were talking about this right before we started too. You said that the oracle bones from China, that those were something that they're claiming is one of the oldest pieces of writing we have. Is that what you'd said?
No, it was the oracle bones are, I think, considered to be some of the oldest Chinese writing.
Okay.
And they weren't discovered, I think, until like the mid 1800s or 1900s. And prior to that, I'm not sure what their significance in history was when they were actually in use, when they were lost. And is there any sort of textual history about them being used after that, being important, but they say that it's extremely old type of writing.
Yeah, I looked them up. I actually have one up on the screen here. I'll switch it over. It might take a second for YouTube to catch up, but I mean, it really looks like hieroglyphs, and it looks a lot to me like Native American writing. You know, this might not even be the right bone, so that's a funny thing to say, the right bone.
So yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. But yeah, it's I pulled up some quotes for when I was looking into radiocarbon dating, and so I don't think that I talked about this on the last show because I just really, within the last few months, my laptop kind of quit out and died, so I was just working off of my phone, so I was posting a lot more on Instagram.
Okay.
And I was basically what I do is I get a quote and then I put it onto a picture, like a small quote, and but useful quotes that I'm going to want to have later on. And so my Instagram is kind of set up, I have it trying to be aesthetic with having a quote and then a picture and then a quote and a picture and so on. And so I've got quite a bit on there, and I've got 3 really good radiocarbon dating quotes. And one of them is about how the original date, how radiocarbon dating is calibrated based on the age of the bread from Pompeii. So they say, well, because this bread is from 79 AD, we can create a mathematical calculation to estimate the decay of the isotope on this bread. And it's based off of the known date. So they say it's an independent dating method, but it's extremely dependent on already known dates to calibrate it. But then it goes on to say that I have another quote. It says that although calibrated dates are more accurate, scholars tend to reject them for the uncalibrated dates to keep timelines and chronologies consistent in academic communities. So even though the science and the calibrated, quote unquote, more accurate date is presented to them, they reject it so that their timelines can remain intact, which is just kind of funny, but
it's just the opposite of what we would prefer, right? Like, let's go ahead and not worry too much about the timeline, which is a much greater question than most people understand anyway. All of us that are our age, we were kind of raised with this idea that this is pretty set in stone, that, you know, it's accepted. And you go looking around, and it's not just like 1 or 2 people in the course of history who've been doubting it. There's just reams and reams, lists and lists of names of people who've tried to rearrange it, tried to amend it. So,
you know something's up when the father of history doubles as the father of lies.
yeah, exactly.
Herodotus.
Yeah. Herodotus, so he's the father of history and lies. It seems it seems accurate, right? Like that's pretty honest, actually. You know, I saw one clip where someone was kind of saying good stuff about Scaliger, so I thought that was kind of interesting. And it wasn't like an academic; it was on another couple guys sitting around on their YouTube and talking about chronology. And they kind of had brought up, you know, the Jan Irvin stuff that he'd done with Jacob Duelman or whatever. That whole, you know, talking about how crappy Scaliger was. And so I thought it was interesting that there was at least one person trying
I remember that,
to defend him a little bit. But have you found anything good you could say about Scaliger?
Yeah, he was, besides him, it was him and Isaac Casaubon. They were in competition for the title of the most learned man in Europe at their time. So I found that sometimes Joseph Scaliger is called the most learned man in Europe, but also other times Isaac Casaubon is.
Yeah, Isaac Casaubon. I'd never heard of him. I write that down.
But yeah, I think they're both friends, so they got along and communicated with each other. But besides that, I found a lot of people talking bad about Scaliger. I'm surprised. Again, this is another thing that I've learned over this year, is that there is an extremely small amount of information about these supposedly extremely influential people that is available on the internet. So not only can you barely find anything on Joseph Scaliger, you can go to his works, but they're all in Latin, and basically none of them have been translated to English. The father of modern chronology, his works are not even available in English. It just blows my mind. So I've been practicing my Latin again to try and get good enough to be able to do quick translations, but I'm not quite there yet.
No, that's awesome. I commend you in your effort, man, because that was one of the cool things that the guy Jacob Duhlman, he's the one that did like 2 or 3 episodes about Scaliger and all the people surrounding him, and he was pretty good with Latin, and he had purchased some old dictionary that had all this anecdotal information in it. And it's the same thing, that he's pretty much saying that that's the only place he could go to try and dig up extra information, because you just run out. There's not, you get like a Wikipedia entry and that's about it, right?
Yeah, you get the Wikipedia entry, and then you get like 20 different websites that all base their work off of that Wikipedia entry.
Yeah.
And that's about it.
And one thing I found hella trippy about these guys was that it was almost like trolling the internet without an internet, because they all took names from like mythical characters, like I forgot who Scaliger called himself, but he had like a handle, and all these guys did, and it was all like Greek names and stuff, so it made it even more confusing for me when I was trying to understand it. It's like, well, wait, who's who and what are they talking about, right?
Yep. So yeah, I definitely want to get my Latin down more to be able to talk to people. I've been considering going and getting some sort of degree, but I just can't imagine getting a degree. Getting a degree is going to be worthwhile without planning some sort of job that I'll use that degree to get.
Oh yeah, I definitely I wouldn't do that.
So
man.
I haven't quite yet done anything. Well, I would want to do that because then I could make more academic connections with people that are at least financially invested. If you're putting money into something, chances are you're gonna at least like pay more attention to it than just haphazard review, at night drinking a beer in your underwear or something.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I guess I just meant like what you said. I'd love to see you become successful in life overall, and I love that you study the subject so hard, but it would suck to go to school just for access and not necessarily be able to turn around and say, all right, now give me $150,000 a year as a professor or something. If you knew for sure you were going to move into a job, then it would be awesome to do that.
See, I wouldn't want to be a professor. I'd want to do something like being able to get access to the manuscripts, to be able to look at them and to translate them and put them out for the public to read. Because I just can't imagine that there's not enough people out there that know Latin that can't get us English translations of these supposedly ancient manuscripts, I'm sitting here looking at these super famous relics, trying to find an English translation for them, and there's just nothing. I'm like sitting on the Yandex Latin to English translator trying to figure it out myself.
Yeah. And I saw that.
There's I just posted this on my Instagram the other night. I think it's called Rambona or something. The Rambona Diatech or something. But it's got a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross, but it's also got Romulus and Remus at his feet under the wolf. And I was just wondering, why would they put that on a piece of Christian art? I don't know if you can pull that up on the screen.
Yeah, I was just doing it. I'm gonna see if I can. I just went to Insta, and you must have just posted this.
It's kind of weird, and it's old Latin too. So the words, and that's another thing that gets me, is that how many people are out there that know Latin right now that we can't get good Latin dictionaries on the internet for people who aren't as well versed as they are. I joined a Latin group to try and talk to other people to learn more Latin. And one person told me that in order to use the dictionary, you have to learn a little bit about Latin. Like, I'm not there trying to learn a little bit about Latin.
Yeah. So
you don't have to tell me to do what I'm doing right now. Like, I'm doing it.
Yeah, so they're
Just
being
blew
all
my mind.
pretentious.
Yeah, they're quite pretentious, I'd say. And then, yeah, I got kicked out of the group because they said that I blocked her because she was being rude to me. And they kicked me out of the group saying she's a very well-known Latin user or something. I'm like, you're super well-known. You're really good at Latin. You can obviously tell if someone's not, and you ought to help them out, you know? Like, if I was really good at Latin and I knew how to speak it and I knew some of the things that I could identify someone else didn't know, I'd quick just tell them instead of being like, oh, hey, why don't you go blindly search Google to figure out all these things that I already know that I'm not going to tell you.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
Dude, that's how I felt when I was back in college for a little while about the anthropology teacher. I just grew to absolutely despise that woman because she was so pretentious, so arrogant. The course load that she put on us for reading, I mean, it was supposed to be the 101 class, you know, like introduction or a survey of anthropology. And I mean, I read quite a bit and I felt overwhelmed. So I was thinking, man, most people don't read books at all anymore. So these people must be going nuts in this class. And then you ask her questions and she's all snide and rude and arrogant. It's like, what the hell? You know, what's the point of having a field of expertise, especially in academia, if you're not going to make your knowledge accessible and be polite, at least somewhat polite? I mean, I understand you get a big head if you get pretty good at something, but you can still be reasonably polite and help people out, you know.
I just can't imagine getting super good at something and then also just being so rude about it and being like, oh, why don't you go get so good at this without any help from me at all? Even though I'm here fully able to help you learn and get better. I'm just going to keep this all a secret and make you toil, even though we could all learn. Like if I knew something and I wanted other people to know more about it too, so that we could work together to figure out more things, you know, like with you guys, I'm not going to come on your show and be like, yeah, I know a lot about new chronology. Why don't you go Google about it, huh?
Yeah.
I'm like, go figure it out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go, guys. You guys get caught up and we'll come back and do a show some other day, all right?
Well, yeah, thanks for having me on. Thanks for having me on. Everyone who's listening, you guys just got to go out and figure it out, even though I know all the answers, you know. Even though I have a lot of opinions on this thing, I'm not going to share them. Just going to keep them to myself. Just blows my mind. I don't know.
I'm glad you blocked her. And I was looking, I got that picture up on the screen here. I moved off of it for a second,
sweet.
but yeah, it's that's a far out trip, because I know this was big part of Tracy Twyman's research was, or at least she used the image, a different image of Remus and Romulus, and so it just makes me wonder. That's so weird to have Jesus on the cross.
So in the new chronology, Romulus is Jesus and Remus is John.
Oh, okay.
On the new chronology. And so potentially this was either made at a time when the lines are being crossed, or it's like a crossover episode, you know?
Yeah, that's what it made me think of.
They say it was made in like the 800s or early 900s or something, but I just don't know about that because, well, first of all, if the new chronology is correct, there's no way it was made in the 800s, 900s. This was probably made in like the 1500s. Maybe even later, like the 1600s potentially.
Yeah.
I'd have to look into it to see what its history is, and if does anybody at all throughout history make note of this thing? Like a monk in the 1200s or something was writing. I came across the diptych today, and it showed Jesus Christ with Romulus and Remus at his feet. I wonder if there's any notes out there like that could confirm it, or if it was just discovered in 1858 or something, and they think it's from the 800s.
Yeah.
Could it have to do with Rome? You know, the Christian church being founded in Rome?
Right, but everything else on this two-piece thing, it appears to be Christian, and so I haven't found anything about the mixing of Christianity with ancient Roman beliefs. Like I don't see them putting Mars and Christ together in a chariot in any of these images. So I'm just wondering, why in the world is that even on there? Somebody at some point in history decided, hey, I'm going to put on these two panels that talk about the life of Jesus Christ, I'm going to put this picture of the wolf and these two kids. Because on the other panel, it looks like potentially it's Mary. I haven't translated the right side, but it looks like potentially those are the Magi. But I could be wrong on that. I'd have to go back and look at it. I'm not super familiar with this thing, but it just kind of tripped me out, so I posted it on my Instagram just to see if anyone else had seen it.
And your Instagram, I love following it. I love what you do with the, tossing a nice looking image together with a quote. I try and let you know by liking all your stuff. I know we comment back and forth sometimes on there. Now, is it just at Chronology Truth if people are on Instagram? Is that your handle?
Yeah, I think so.
But if not, if you go to Insta and type Chronology Truth, it'll pop right up. But yeah, I was just glancing to see if there's any other picture right here. Like we could put up the one before that, the picture before that. This looks like it says, "Here's a mosaic from Pompey's House of the Mosaic Doves. You can clearly see there are 3 pine cones depicted with pine needles included." Oh yeah, you've been going over the pine cone stuff. That's right. That reminds me.
Yeah, we can pull that up.
Pine cones and pineapples too, right?
What?
You've been covering pineapples too, right?
Yeah. If you want to go to my Fomenko studies on Facebook, I have a whole thread that talks about this pineapple, and I have all the images and stuff that are required to kind of explain where I'm at with it so far.
Okay, well let me...
Did the carving say Constantine in it?
What?
Did it say Constantine on the engraving that we were just looking at with Romulus and Remus?
Oh, on the what's it called, the diptych or whatever, the 2-panel thing.
Yeah.
It might have on the right side. I'm pretty sure it doesn't say Constantine on the left side with the picture of Christ on it.
Okay, well, that was a question from the chat.
Here, let me just pull it up on my Instagram. I'm closing out of the chat, so I can't see any of the comments anymore. Oh no, that was another thing. So in the new chronology, Edward the Confessor is a reflection of the Christ character. And it says on the right side, Confessorus something. And so it starts out with Confessor. And I'm wondering if that doesn't have anything to do with Christ up there. But yeah, I'm going to try and translate it. It's all in Old Latin, and they're all the letters. There's no spaces between the words, so I gotta first figure out what the words are, and then put the spaces in, and then try and translate the words over one by one. But the right side says, what?
They weren't making it easy, were they?
No. Yeah, and so I'm trying to find translations online for this thing. Apparently it's a relic and people know about it. So I was just surprised that I couldn't find any English on it. The right side, it says Ego Sum IHS Nazarenus, which is I am Jesus something, I think, holy human savior of man. It's Jesus, savior of man of Nazareth. So and then Rex Theodorum is the king of the Jews. And on his left side, it says Mulierin, which I think is Latin for woman. And the right one, I couldn't find a translation for that word, but I'm pretty sure it's disciple. So like the woman and the disciple, And then the bottom, it says Romulus and Remus. And then I think something about a wolf. I haven't figured that out yet either. So yeah, it's a pretty trippy looking picture.
Do they have any translators, like where you can just enter text or put, photographs in and
Yeah, but they're all for they do, but they're all for the New Latin, and all the word forms have to be correct. So, like, I just don't understand how 2019 we haven't had a computer genius, put together some sort of Latin to English translator. Like somebody commented in the chat, like, why don't they just have a program that you can upload a picture and it translates the page for you? You can do that, but the translation
We're
is
just not allowed to have it. I'm sure that's the case. That they probably do have that technology, and we're just not allowed access to it. And that just reminded me, man. If you're really having trouble with something translated and you're under the gun to get it translated quickly, let us know, or let us put you in touch with Harrison, because I know he's pretty good at all that. He translated that whole Templar document. So I mean, I encourage you, of course, to learn. I saw that they just started to. They're either getting ready to, or they put out regular Latin, I think, on Duolingo. So I was thinking to jump into that.
Well, I took Latin classes when I was a kid, so
Yeah.
It's kind of like riding a bike. I'm getting it back pretty quick, but it just takes daily practice of reading it and translating it to get the hang of it all again. There's only so many words.
All right, so I'm into the Fomenko studies group. Okay, now is this your group? You made this group, right?
All right, sweet. Yeah, I made that group.
Okay, so we encourage you to come find us on Facebook, Fomenko Studies. Steven made this group, and it's pretty tight, man. It's good stuff. So, do you want me to just take the first picture and put it up there?
Is there a screen share that I can see it on the computer? I'm just not. Oh, here we go. Now it's up.
It'll just lag a little bit. I'll try and get it up ahead of. So I'm just gonna click on the first picture and let you go from there. Okay,
cool. So if you're clicking on the picture that I think you are, it's the picture of the gods at some Thermopolis or something. I don't know if that's actually a picture of a pineapple. I just found that when I was looking for mosaics, Pompeii mosaics, and it almost looks like potentially on the table that the gods are touching, that there's potentially a pineapple there. And then between the snakes on that altar, there's also potentially what looks like could possibly be a pineapple as well. I'm basing that off of the other two pictures that depict pineapples with these sort of shoots coming up off the top. It's not something that you see in really any other fruit, besides maybe like like a leek or something, like a onion or a carrot would have something like that.
Those don't really look like that anyway. I mean, it's a pretty distinct top of a fruit is that pineapple shape.
So yeah, go to the next picture on that. I think that's a better picture of what I'm showing here.
It really looks like a pineapple.
I can't see it yet, but which one is it? Is it the snakes?
Snakes opposite sides of a table.
Yep.
And there's some
that's what leads me to believe potentially the pineapple. I didn't even see the one on the table that the gods are at, but at first I was just looking at the altar with the snakes, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, that kind of looks like a pineapple, like the other one, but it's damaged, and so it's hard to say what's there, what's not. But this one is much clearer image. You can definitely see that's a pineapple. You could. Yeah, I want to do a poll or something and just ask a bunch of do in the high school or something, ask a bunch of high scores, what does this look like to you? And besides, the thing is that there's a few things that they say they could be, but we'll just touch up on that later. But obviously anyone looking at that looks like a pineapple. Like the first thing that you're going to think of when you look at that, you're not going to say, oh, that's an odd looking artichoke.
Yeah,
that's what some scholars think, is that it's an artichoke.
That's crazy. How could it be an artichoke? An artichoke doesn't look anything like that. Like the top of an artichoke is just a big fat stem,
Yeah, I don't know. So to all these other ideas, I'll tell you the other ones later, but all of them, whenever someone says it to me, I'm like, okay, can you bring up any other image of the thing that you think it is from that time so that we can compare them? Because these artists at Pompeii, if you look at their details, these are not unskilled artists. It's not their first time laying stone to create a mosaic. They're depicting things, and these are clear images that we can tell the different types of fruits. We could look at the snakes. You can see people's facial expressions. They have shading and color and all sorts of life to them. These are pristine artists.
Yeah,
And
this is a
supposedly,
mosaic, not a painting. It's a mosaic, right?
well, I think that's a painting,
Oh, okay.
potentially.
But the first one
I
was
think
a
that is a
mosaic,
painting, but the next picture is a mosaic if you want to go to the next one.
Yeah. Okay, here we go.
But yeah, so basically is that these artists, from what I can tell, they know exactly what they're doing. Like, and from what I've read so far, Pompeii and Herculaneum were both considered to be prestigious cities. They were wealthy and
Yeah.
they could afford good artists. And so if you were an artist that depicted an artichoke or a pine cone as such, you'd lose your job. Like, you would,
Yeah.
if you tried to depict a pine cone like that, the person that hired you would be like, "What is that? That is not what a pine cone looks like." He's like, "Well, I thought I'd stuff the needles in the top of it for the first time ever." Looks like a pine cone. I don't know. That's just my take on it. So yeah, if you go into the comment section on the actual post, right now you're on a picture, so it's just showing you the comments on that picture.
Yeah, I'll go to the whole post here. Okay.
Cool. So I'll show you some examples of these pine cones. And these Pompeii artists were not idiots. They knew exactly how to depict a pine cone with pines.
So now
I'm not sure what. Let me know what you pull up because I'm a little bit lagged behind.
Yeah, so I'm in the comments section. I opened it so that more comments show up, and what I'm seeing here is posts from you. Romans in Brazil, pre-Columbian, transocean contacts, comment on Rose diffusionism and archaeology. And
those are just articles that kind of talk about the topic, but scroll down to the pictures.
Okay, so here we get down to the pictures. Here's a man with like a scary looking face. It looks like he's got noodles for hair.
Okay, yeah. So I think it's to the right of him. I'm lagging behind, but I'm pretty sure it's to the right of him.
Okay,
you
I'm
can
gonna go ahead
see.
and open that picture up bigger. So yeah, there we go. Yeah, it's a pineapple or a pine cone. I mean.
Well, it's a pine cone.
Yeah, yeah.
And you can tell because of the pine needles. If you've ever seen a pine tree with a pine cone on it, the needles so if the cone was right here, the needles would be going out, covering it like that.
Right.
They don't go up against it, they go out from it. And so you can see right there, there's two pine cones. They're still attached to the stick, and they're using such detail on this mosaic that they depict two pine cones attached to the stick with the pine needles coming out in the proper direction that pine needles would be coming out. And so some people say that is a pineapple, but I disagree with them. I think that's definitely pine cones.
No, yeah, I just misspoke. I meant pine cone. I just misspoke when it popped up.
It's easy to get them mixed up, so the words. But so yeah, those are obviously pine cones. You can tell based off of the whole art. So I'm wondering to myself, are there more images of pine cones that look like this on these Roman mosaics? And sure enough, every image of a pine cone that I found is an exact depiction of a pine cone with the needles in the proper direction, sometimes on sticks. Yeah, you could go to the next picture by this point.
And
I don't know if you have already.
You want to just go straight down to the one with the birds here?
Yeah, go to the birds. Okay. Might as well.
And just in case anyone out there in the chat is not keeping up as to our whole point here, is that according to traditional chronology of history, these items shouldn't have been in these locations. So if anything, this is casting doubt on what kind of commerce was going on, let alone when things
Let me explain
Go ahead.
I'll explain the situation here real quick. So on the traditional timeline, Pompeii got covered by Vesuvius in 79 AD. And from that point on, until it was rediscovered and excavated, it more or less went untouched, except for by looters. But basically, a lot of the stuff was well preserved because of the volcanic eruption. And the idea that there's pineapples there seems insane to traditional historians, because it's knowledge that Christopher Columbus was the first person, the first European to bring pineapples back to Europe and the Mediterranean. And they became popular under I can't remember her name. Queen Victoria, not Victoria, I don't think. I have a quote for it, but basically, because of Christopher Columbus, pineapples became popular. And for there to be a pineapple on the wall of Pompeii, and not just one questionable one, but I've now found 3 images available on the internet, much less in the records that are being kept in museums that have been taken from the sites. I'd like to go and review them myself to look for them and create some sort of study for this, because there's not much out on it right now. But yeah, basically the idea is that either these artists misrepresented a pine cone or an artichoke, or I've heard a couple other things now, bread with garnish, or guapa fruit, or no, duana or something. I don't know. Couple different ideas, but that either that these artists misrepresented a fruit so that it's so indistinguishable from the real thing it looks like a pineapple, or that the Romans in 79 AD had pineapples and they were aware of pineapples, and so they depicted one. Or this is what the new chronology would maintain, and there's a lot more evidence than just this pineapple for this, that Pompeii was covered in 1631, that it wasn't covered in 79 AD.
Wow.
And so if Pompeii was covered in 1631, then a pineapple on the wall makes perfect sense, because they were symbols of royalty and wealth at that time, and they were being produced at that time. They just in that same century, they started producing them for the first time in England and Holland, supposedly. And I have a friend that says he has an encyclopedia. He saw one that says the main export of Tartary was pineapples.
Oh.
And so the pineapples were huge at that time. And so it would make perfect sense for there to be pineapples on these mosaic walls in a city that has a reputation of being so great that some people don't even think it exists. So that's what we're at right now, is that I think that it was 1631 that Pompeii was covered, because of the new chronology, and trying to figure out whether or not these are pineapples is part of that, to create a solid, comprehensive study into what actually is this. So the idea comes from 1950. A guy, Casella, Casella, published a study on fruit, and the picture that you have up right now, if it's the one with the platter of fruits with it looks like an orange or a lemon on there, and there's a chicken with
Yeah, still same picture.
some
Yeah.
doves and maybe a duck up top. It's got that weird looking fruit in the middle. It's like lumpy.
Yeah.
See that? Third fruit from the right, fourth fruit from the left, fifth maybe. But supposedly that is a custard apple. Also something that the Romans would not have had in 79 AD. But they would have had in 1631 because it's from Asia. And they would have had the custard apple at that time.
Oh, I'm gonna pop this other picture up for a minute. Is that this other picture? Is a picture of the custard apple there? It's like a big fat.
I don't know if you went back or if you left it, but what I see, it's above 3 birds and under 1.
Yeah, no, I'm going back to that picture now. The picture that you posted in the comments section has four panels, and the top right panel looks very much like the fruit you're describing here.
So yeah, that's what I was saying, is that's a custard apple for anyone who hasn't seen it.
Okay,
and that's quite obviously what's being depicted by these competent artists. You're trying to some historians today are trying to tell you that these artists were just, they got to a certain point where they couldn't figure out how to depict slices of lemons all stacked on each other, and that's what it looks like. It's not a custard apple; it's just lemon slices.
There's historians saying that. You found that as an actual.
I think
quote?
that's the argument that explains that.
That's crazy.
I will have to find the quote again, but I'm pretty sure that's what the argument was: is that it's just lemon slices or orange slices or something that are stacked up.
the whole piece is beautiful. The whole mural, I mean, mosaic is beautiful. There's no way they're just gonna botch the middle. Like it's in the middle. It's like one of the most
Yeah, it's the
featured things.
centerpiece.
Yeah.
And obviously it's a rare, exquisite fruit, and that's why it's in the center.
Right.
But
Yeah. Look what we got. They're bragging.
exactly. So yeah, I don't know, but so yeah, here you can you see those pictures of the pineapples now. I was wondering, like, one person brought up perspective on the original mosaic
Okay.
that people usually talk about from the House of the Phoebes. It's the one it's a small pineapple on the side of the plate, and it's circled in red on this post. But somebody brought up the point of perspective and how the grapes and the apples and the other fruit on that bowl of fruit, they are in proper perspective to each other. And so I was wondering to myself, well, what can pineapples be eaten smaller? Like, are there different? I didn't know much about pineapples prior to looking into this, apparently, because I learned a ton about pineapples.
Yeah. Interesting. That's interesting.
I was talking to my girlfriend, just talking her ear off, saying pineapple every other word. She was having enough of it. But yeah, you can see on those images, there's quite a few different types of pineapple, and then they come in different sizes that you can eat them in. And so I think it's quite lucky. It's quite reasonable that it would just be a smaller pineapple depicted on that bowl of fruit, regardless, or compared to the pineapple that you'd get at the store today. You know, it's one of the bigger ones.
So they do have available these little tiny ones to eat, huh? I see the way they're cut open. That's interesting. I've never seen have you ever seen a little tiny pineapple like that?
Not prior to this.
Yeah,
Jim,
no, me
have you?
neither. That's interesting.
I think that's how they start out when they're growing.
Yeah, so maybe it was just a baby pineapple, or maybe it was an artichoke, but that's still to be decided.
Yeah, even that little tiny baby one doesn't look like an artichoke to me. So then the umbrella pine, your comment says that the umbrella pine is the specific pine which some scholars have suggested.
For the top one, for the one with the red circle around it,
Right.
They say that the artist was trying to depict an umbrella pine, specifically an umbrella pine, because that's the type of pine that they would have apparently at the time. So yeah, the artist, and then yeah, I post some pictures of pine cones just to show you like what a real pine cone looks like compared to the mosaics of obvious pine cones. These people were looking at them and depicting them extremely accurately.
I guess
So
they do
yeah,
have a
that's
mini pineapple. They're dwarf pineapples.
yeah. There's a few different types.
Might have to start growing those under my LEDs, man, so I can just pop one in. I wonder if you can eat the skin on it instead of having to peel it. Now you got me thinking. I'm a fruit freak, so I got a pineapple in my kitchen. I'm gonna cut up after the show, and I'm not lying. I can go get it. You want me to go get it so that we have a real pineapple? We can really show people we know what we're talking about. No.
Yeah, it's like we haven't seen pineapples. That's the argument, is that these people have never seen a pineapple. Like that is the thing, is that they were rare at the time, and so potentially the artist depicting this really hadn't ever seen a pineapple, but he's still depicting a pineapple, regardless if he's seen a real one or not. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, on that picture of the pine cone right there, if you scroll down on those comments, there's images of mosaics. I think you have to load more comments under it.
Okay.
But you can't really see them because I was looking at it on my phone, and I can zoom in really far. Not as easy as you can on a computer, but there's like 3 or 4 more mosaics that you can see pine cones around the border, and they are very clearly pine cones. There's no mistake about it. So it's just part of my argument that the artists were not incompetent. They knew what pine cones were and how to depict them, and they didn't botch it when they were trying to make pineapples. Another argument is that it was just one example of a pineapple, so that's why I got up to 3 of them now, and I bet that there's more if I keep looking.
Yeah, and I can see the border around this. The one mosaic I have on the screen now is like all the scholars sitting around, like looks like they're jib-jabbing and reading books, but it's got a beautifully detailed border of like faces or masks and all kinds of fruits and stuff in there.
And I bet you could pick out what each type of those fruits are. Like,
Yeah.
for real. Like, you could identify
Yeah,
the
obviously
real.
an apple, obviously a lemon, etc. I mean, it's very obvious.
So yeah, I was looking into that. It's kind of weird. I never thought, if you would have asked me 5 years ago if I could see myself researching the history of pineapples and apples, I don't know if I would have said yes.
Right. It is weird where studying takes us, especially when you get into weird subjects or there's not very much information about them. You end up learning all kinds of stuff that it's almost like a laugh. You know what I mean? Like we've been taking, a half an hour now talking about pine cones and pineapples.
It's
But-
such a specific niche too. Like the history of Roman depiction of fruit.
I like
was,
the idea of an article about the controversy surrounding pine cones and pineapples is a good title, you know. These are
I'm gonna make an article here soon about it. As soon as I get this next computer all set up, I'm gonna put together an article to state my ideas once and for all, and you can pick it apart, you know, and see where I'm right and wrong. And
So with your new computer, are you
I don't know,
going
man.
with,
The argument that I got right now is pretty strong. I feel like.
I think it is
What?
too. Are you going to be a Mac guy or a PC guy, Steven? Which way are you going with your new machine?
It's gonna be PC. I'm custom building it.
Hear that, Jim? PC. Jim's a Mac
Yeah,
guy.
well, nobody's perfect.
Hey, I like Mac too. I like them both. They both have their ups.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Especially if you're building a computer, it's a lot easier with a PC. You get pretty specific that way.
And
Good
I
for
don't
others
know.
to-
I don't know
Yeah,
if we ever told you.
It saves a lot of
Steven.
money and you get a lot of know-how.
Yeah. You could even make a Mac out of a PC,
Yeah, you could.
which is kind
You
of
could
cool.
tear a Mac apart and use it on your PC.
People have done it. I've seen it.
I don't know if Apple will be too happy.
When they
You know,
don't-
they might send their lawyers to your house. No kidding. you
Yeah,
know?
right.
But I don't know if we ever told you before or not, but Jim and I have found out that we're almost on opposite ends of every single little thing. Like, he's a Ford guy, I'm a Chevy guy. Like, he drinks a Coca-Cola if he's going to have a cola, and I drink Pepsi. And he's Mac, I'm PC. Like, so we like to rib each other a little bit about the fact that we're always the opposite side of the spectrum.
SB, do you say pop or soda?
I say soda.
Jim, what do you say?
I say pop.
Oh my gosh, and it continues.
Very good, very good. That's one we didn't even think of. Now, I'll admit, I do say pop sometimes now since I moved up to Walla Walla, but being from California, you definitely say soda. And people who say pop, like where I grew up, like someone would make fun of you, like, pop, what's a pop? You know, they'd like be offended, like it's called a soda, you know.
See, I'm from the Midwest, so we say soda pop.
Yeah. Soda pop, yeah.
We're right in the middle.
And I think in the South, I think it's Coke. They call everything a Coke, you know, no matter what. It's a Coke.
So yeah, there's people talking about the beheading of Medusa in the chat.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've even spoken about this on camera or not, but the beheading of Medusa is about Dmitry Donskoy in the Battle of Kulikovo in 1380, and how putting Medusa's head is actually it's a gun, and they were turning people to stone by shooting them with guns. It's the first battle in history that makes use of gunpowder, and they're using hollowed out trees to shoot basically like buckshot at the enemy. And so if you were on the battlefield and your right side, your right flank just got taken out by a buckshot, all that's left there is just a bunch of stone and rock. Is supposedly the origin of the Medusa Gorgon head on the shield of turning him into stone with a extremely mythical, powerful weapon that just can't be explained.
Interesting. So the chat was saying that stuff. They already knew this theory.
No, I don't know. I don't know if they
Okay,
knew
cool.
about
Yeah,
that.
I wasn't sure
They
if
just
that.
brought up Medusa, and I figured I'd just say, it's a pretty loose format show, so
Yeah.
we're sort of jumping all over the place,
No, that's
talking
awesome.
about pineapples and soda pop.
So, Steven, did you ever take a look at the Greenland Theory website by a guy named I think his name's it's Chase Taylor. It's kind of a shilly weird site, but he talks about how it's far out. If you've never gone to
I think I have.
yeah,
I think I know what you're talking about.
greenlandtheory.com, you land on it, like if you're searching for this kind of stuff, it'll kind of pop up. But he was talking about how the use of gunpowder and cannons and everything like that, they think that the flaming dragons described are actually that the Romans got their hands on cannons and gunpowder, and so that they're describing dragons in myths and in ancient history, and really they're describing them having technology that we don't give account for until later in history. So that's kind of similar. Maybe your Medusa comment made me think that.
Yeah, I think that potentially that is on point where they couldn't describe what they were looking at. But so this is what I would think is that potentially that would be a later addition as to trying to describe this as the concept of dragons already existed. And when they came face to face with guns, potentially they believed that that's what the myths were talking about, the dragons. But from what I've seen, or from what I've read, is that potentially the dragons are talking about cave dwellers, and that these people, they knew how to wield fire, and they'd live in the caves, and they were superior to the other people that didn't necessarily have science or tools or language, and that the idea of the dragon's mouth spewing fire is the cave mouth where the humans would go into, and so you have the people as dragons, where they're called dragons because they live in the cave with their treasures and their fire, and that's the origin of the dragon myth.
Wow. Now, I got something to say about that. Okay, so like a lot of these studies into ancient history and stuff, they'll lead you to Hyperborea, to Atlantis, to all of this kind of lost ancient civilization ideas, and I know that one of the main theories is that when Atlantis fell, that the survivors escaped on ships or whatever, and that they came and then they taught whoever they met, like native primitive people, that they started to teach them technology. So that, and plus I know that it also involves caves, because I remember like them talking about a huge wise giant that had snakes for legs. It kind of looks like Abraxas, or like the two-legged mermaid from the really old Starbucks logo, and so that just made me, that all my brain's just spinning on that idea that kind of goes together. The dragons in a cave plus the wise men that came from the sea that teach everybody how to, smelt metal or use language or tend crops. Maybe that all ties together somehow.
So Fomenko recently came out with a book. Fomenko came out with a book. It's called Utopia, and it goes into the whole roots of Atlantis and what it actually was and what it describes. And I had a chance to skim it one time. I skimmed through it a bit, and I can't find the link to it anymore. But they have the table of contents up, and it covers a lot of the content that's in there, like just through the titles of the chapters and the sections. You can kind of get a general idea on what they're arguing for. But I've actually been looking into Atlantis quite a bit too recently. I'm going on Lost Origins tomorrow for their podcast. So I'm pretty pumped about that. I've been getting together as much good info as I can for them. And I'm thinking that, so this is my idea, is in the new chronology, I don't know if this is someone else's idea and I'm suffering from cryptomnesia, but I'm thoroughly convinced that some of these ideas are my original ideas. And so in the new chronology, the character that rediscovers Plato and reintroduces him to the world is Gemestus Plethon. and he adopts the name of Plato because of his fascination with him, and he reintroduces a lot of the texts and recovers them and gives us these ideas on who Plato was and what he said. But so in the new chronology, that's potentially when the Plato character gets created. Gemistus Pletho, he bases his works on older documents and chronicles to create a new character that is to bring in ancient knowledge to help new people understand what's going on. And at this time, it's also around Doomsday in 1492. And I'm wondering if potentially the story about Atlantis falling and specifically what you were just talking about, going across the seas and teaching these primitive people new technology, isn't talking about the conquest of America in 1492 when Columbus goes across the sea to the New World to teach all these savage Indians how to live, because they treated them as very juvenile in a sense, they weren't as, I guess, technologically developed to be able to defend themselves. And so I'm wondering if it's not about that topic there. And then also I was looking into the whole idea of 9,000 years in Plato's Critias. He says that 9,000 years exactly have passed since the original flood. And there's flood myths across the world that talk about a massive flooding that happened.
Yeah.
I also think that potentially that's more evidence that it was around 1492 that this story was being written, because they were trying to figure out if it was really the end of the world. And so they had their mathematicians and astronomers trying to calculate the creation of mankind and the creation of the world. And one of the major pinpoints for that was the flood. And the flood happened shortly after the world was created. And so I think potentially they were trying to figure out if it was the end time, if they were getting closer to the year 10,000 or something for the final denominator. Some people thought it was the world 7,000 since Adam. And
right.
So that's what the huge hysteria was all about in 1492. It's 7,000 years after Anno Mundi, so after Adam. And they thought that it was the end of the world, Europe and everything that they knew was going to be destroyed. And they sent out their Christian colonizer to try and reach the New World to populate it with Christians and to continue on the legacy and to build a new world for everybody. And maybe they did. Maybe that was the apocalypse and we're living in the doomsday. I thought it'd be more severe if so. From what the Bible says.
yeah, the Bible account sure makes it sound a little bit more extreme, but I also wonder sometimes if we're not just numb to it, because things are pretty wacky and crazy and bad, at least if you follow and trust any of the media. Now, I try to take all media, no matter what, with a total grain of salt, and for the most part choose to disbelieve it more often than I do believe it. Not just because I'm skeptical, but because I feel like that's a healthier route for everybody. Like all the shootings and all the craziness, all the bombings, all the wars, all the famines, global warming is going to kill us. I mean, to me, it's better if you just choose to say, I don't know if that's real or not. It probably isn't, because it just makes you feel better,
Maybe. I mean, I like to try and figure out if stuff is real or not, and I just think that there's some things that we just won't be able to tell on. We have less than 5% of the ocean explored, less than 1% of the earth explored, like the core of it, the insides. I doubt we're in any spot to be able to say whether or not global warming is a legit thing. People say, have you read the IPCC? And yeah, I've read the IPCC. And it's just a bunch of thinkers trying to prove their thoughts.
Yeah, well, I mean, and then, I remember finding the whole scandal of the ClimateGate emails. Now, I didn't sit there and religiously pore over every one, but there was plain evidence, if you go look up ClimateGate emails, of them agreeing to fudge the numbers. Just like you were talking about with language. I mean, pardon me, with timelines. Well, we know there's some evidence that says this might not be right, but we're going to agree to keep it how it is, so that it's convenient for us to talk about it. Like, well, that's the wrong way to have a conversation. You know, that's the wrong way to
So-
have a thought. You know.
My conversation, it usually ends here with people. If global warming is real, let's bug bomb the termites. If you're not ready to talk about that, you're not really ready to try and deal with global warming. If you,
Yeah.
you don't want to bug bomb the termites, then you don't really want to deal with it. The termites produce the most CO2 in the whole entire world. They produce like 87 times more than everything else in the world combined. But nah, we're not ready to talk about doing that. They just want to cut out plastic straws from California and cut down on fossil fuel emissions.
No, so
I
you're
don't
talking
know.
about real termites. I thought you were talking about the human beings. No, but,
No, legitimate termites, man. There's billions and trillions of them that are producing CO2 and causing global warming. If you really
yeah,
want to get
allegedly
down to
causing.
it.
Yeah, there's. That's
But I don't know. This wasn't supposed to be about global warming. I don't know. I just don't have super strong opinions on global warming. So
Oh no, yeah, we don't really cover it either. I just meant the whole, like, that's just one thing out of 20 that they're pitching to us all the time as a reason to be scared or unhappy, right? You know?
right. But yeah, bug bomb the termites. I still want to talk to someone about that, you know. And if you really want to get down for global warming, I'm up for trying to fix it. Just tell me what kind of bug bomb you want to use.
Well, we need to get the logistics of the scope and scale of what it's, you know, where can we start to fight the termites? Where's it probably going to lead us, and how do we navigate once we get going? So we're going to have to get like a huge stockpile of bug bombs first and foremost.
We're gonna have to work. We're gonna have to work around all the termite activists too. You know, termites have rights. Rights for termites.
Termites are pretty awesome. So you might even get the people that have termites as pets complaining. You know, like
For real. We could even get in trouble just for saying this on YouTube. Just the idea of bug bombing the termites could be offensive.
I hope we don't get flagged.
skyscraper architects are just rolling, just pissed. where would skyscrapers be without termites, right? We'd all be living in circular mud huts. But yeah, I don't know. So let's segue back into history. We can talk about mud huts and the Aborigines in Australia, who are considered to be some of the oldest people in the world. They're considered to have some of the oldest information and some of the oldest languages and practices. I don't know if you guys have looked into Aboriginal Australians at all.
Not too much, but I mean, I'm somewhat familiar with them. But
so yeah, it's a huge thing in history and archaeology to be able to study and explore over there, because they get some of the oldest dates back from their culture and trying to pinpoint where they were at. But the idea is that the rock art and cavemen and primitive people were living tens of thousands of years ago, and more or less people rose up out of that into civilization. And it was still in, I think, the 17 or 1800s when the greater world made contact with the Aboriginals, that they were still today they're still very primitive people. There's still tribes in the Amazon that are at risk, that are living primitively, and they don't do much beyond building with the materials that they have and doing hunting, fishing, gathering type stuff. It seems weird to me to try and displace people as being, these white people were doing this 60,000 years ago, and then they figured out fire and how to domesticate horses, and they rose up. I guess the argument is that they had the environment to do so and that they got out of it. But the idea that all cave art is just ancient, just so ancient, is just such a weird presumption to me, that if you were to find some cave art, that it would have had to be 120,000 years ago that a guy painted a horse on the cave, when it's, I think, a known fact in art history that Michelangelo went to learn to paint in caves. And even Plato's allegory was them messing around in caves. and there's a lot of information about people being in caves. So I don't understand if there's any archaeologists or historians listening to this. I just want to hear the best reason as to why we need to assume that cave art is super, super old, unless it's like, graffiti, like somebody went in there and said Carl and Sophie forever, with a heart around it.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
obviously,
plus that takes
just
us
made
back
me.
into the cave. It's interesting that that's taken us back inside the caves, back to the theory of dragons or the ancient unknowns. So it seems like, as usual, they kind of turn everything inside out. Like, if we think about caves based on what they taught us in history, we imagine like Ooga Booga, caveman, like barely learning how to cook with his fire. And it sounds like it's more likely that that's where the scholars, and maybe even where these, I don't want to call them aliens, but they're alien to us. Like if men came across the ocean on boats and we were like the Aboriginal guy that I had on the screen here, and then they start teaching us stuff, and they teach us inside of a cave. That's the opposite of what they've trained us to think about, cave dweller. You say cave dweller, you don't think of like, well, that's where I'm going to get my art degree, and that's where the smartest guy I know is,
Michelangelo.
Yeah.
You don't think of. Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you'd bring that up. The indigenous people, I've heard before that they didn't recognize the boats on the horizon, that they didn't know what they were seeing.
Yep.
And it just makes me wonder, why would an artist in Pompeii depict a pineapple? Like, to depict a pine cone, they would want to depict it in a way that they would recognize what they're looking at. And so that the person that the art's being made for isn't wondering, just sitting there scratching their head, thinking like, can you get that artist back over here? What is this thing on the right of the fruit bowl?
Yeah.
Is it a pine cone? I've never seen something like this before. I couldn't fathom it. What could this possibly be? And there was like a couple people that hired artists to do that. They're like looking at their painting and they're like scratching their head like, yeah, I'm going to need you to call the artist back. I got a couple questions about this centerpiece fruit here.
Well, that's what we would do. Jem and I are both artists.
I've never seen something like this. I just can't wrap my head around it.
That's what you do, especially if you're working as an artist to create more art. You're like, you got to get that guy back over here and have us explain. I want to know everything I can learn about this thing because I'd never seen one before, right? Like just now, I had Aboriginals. What's that? Did this pop up on the screen yet? Can you see that, Steven? This guy with his
No, but or the guy sees it and he's like, what is that? I have got to get someone else to paint this thing. I just have no clue. This artist with his artistic, yeah, all right, I see it now.
So just because it seems like we got a theme going here, I added pineapple to the search for, I typed in Aboriginal Australians, and got that one picture up there. So no, I typed in pine cone actually, and of course it comes up with this huge pineapple. I think these are edible. These are a different kind of pineapple. I just wanted you guys to know, since we're learning about pineapples together tonight.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave you and Jem out.
I don't know if he's a Aboriginal himself, but his shirt definitely has their art style.
Yeah.
I've looked into their art a bit. The Aboriginal art and the African art is really similar to each other, so it's kind of interesting. It's one of those games of, chicken or the egg, which one came first? Did the Africans do it and then the Australians, or did the Australians then the Africans? I would argue Africans then Australians, but I think a lot of people might argue the opposite, just because there's this idea that the Aboriginal Australians are the oldest people in the world.
Yeah, most people argue for Africa being the origin of almost everything, so that's their default answer. But I've also heard what you just said, that the Aboriginal Australians are the oldest, the most ancient people.
I think new chronology is a out of Asia theory. The earliest we can tell is that our species was traveling through Asia before they got to Africa and expanded rapidly.
Oh, and hear that? Just scrolling through these other pictures, here's the Sumerian art of the gentleman with wings. I used to know this guy's name. It's not Marduk, it's I just can't remember. But have you tied that work into the other stuff you're doing with pineapples? I know that or pine cones and pineapples both. I know that they symbolize the some people think it's symbolic of the pineal gland.
Pineal gland.
Yeah.
Which to another point also could be an argument for a later rendition of the pine cone becoming extremely important. But at the same time, the idea is that the Christ character was also Euclid, the father of mathematics, and that these ancient humans were extremely in tune with nature, as above, so below. And so I just wonder to what degree were they able to project in through mathematical observation that they could tell the insides of people. Because from what I can tell, it wasn't until the 1500s with the rise in grave robbery and mass graves, and people were starting to pick apart bodies. That's when the art started to improve a lot, is because they were dissecting humans.
Right.
They were really able to get close to what a human looked like. I wonder if that's not when the idea of the pine cone really started to pick on too, is because they were cutting apart the brain and they were looking at the different parts of the brain and they thought, oh, well, that's the center of the brain, it looks like a pine cone. And potentially that plays into it a bit, but I'd have to look into it more. These are pretty preliminary observations.
Yeah. It's good to speculate, and that's kind of what we're doing tonight anyway, is like the wide open free-for-all, I don't know if you ever watched, we had a guest...
yeah, right.
We had a guest... Oh, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Oh, we had a guest, he came on and he has a documentary he made on YouTube called The Smurfy Code. Like, it's about Smurfs and about the symbolism behind Smurfs, and the pine cone ended up being a big part of it, or maybe it was the pineapple or both. But his theory was that the pine cone and the pineapple were symbolic of the Grail stone. And the whole thing, I think you'd really like it, man. I was trying to remember the guy's name. He used a pseudonym, and I just can't. Ilion Maybe, that was his name. Ilion Maybe. But he came on, and him and Tracy Twyman dressed up like Smurfs. And we talked about his entire research process of, like studying the Smurfs and their Phrygian cap, and how it all led to the Grail stone, and how that's why you see these great big pine cone, pineapple looking things at all the king's palaces. His theory was that this is actually the Grail stone that's outside the palace, up on the pillars, in front of the churches, in front of the towers. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I didn't know that was the guy's name, but I've definitely looked into that a bit. How they have I think Phrygian caps or something.
Yeah.
Is what they're called.
Yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in the Smurfs. The cartoons in the 20th century, they had a ton of stuff behind them that's really esoteric. Unless you look into it, you just had no clue what you were watching. But then when you do look into it, you're like, oh wow, there's like hundreds of years of history backing this thing. And
yeah,
there's I don't know, man, 20th century cartoons, they're pretty messed up. Like cartoons today are pretty messed up too, but I don't know, man. It just seems like a lot of cartoons are just so messed up.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? Because the cartoons, like even He-Man. Like when I was a kid, I loved He-Man. But when I grew up, I thought, oh, it's just kind of a, some writers were just being creative in a room, or they're coming up with ideas. And you go look, and it's like, well, not really. There's a bunch of ancient archetype mythos hidden up in all of them. All the comic books, or like, if you've ever gone back and watched Warner Brothers cartoons, they're completely like adult content. They just made it all go right over our heads,
Yeah, no, I'm in a younger generation than you are, so I grew up on like Cartoon Network and stuff, but my girlfriend and I, we recently went back to watch some of those cartoons, and man, are they messed up. Like, yeah. I don't have any kids right now, but if I did, when I do have kids, because I hope to have some someday, I just can't imagine being so blind to the content on the television that I'd sit them down in front of it to just binge on it for a little while. Like, I would never let my kids watch like the Fairly Odd Parents or SpongeBob SquarePants or any of that type of stuff. It's just so weird.
Yeah, it is.
And it's even worse. It's even worse today than it was back then, it seems.
I agree. The
Yeah, it's
cartoons
pretty
nowadays
weird.
freak me out.
Yeah, they're all like Illuminati, like esoteric stuff.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna step away for just a second, but Jim, I want you to tell us about the satanic dog cartoon that you found. Do you remember that one?
Oh yeah, gosh, I forget what it's called. It's on Cartoon Network. It's called like
Yeah,
Cat
I'll
dog?
be right back. But yeah, even if you don't remember the name, tell them about the
the name of
details.
the dog. It's like Squiggles or something. I'd have to kind of look at it, but it's
Courage?
no,
Courage the Cowardly Dog?
no. It was on Adult Swim.
Oh,
This dog that was like a satanic dog. He was like a border collie, and he had like inside of his doghouse he had this like little like a tunnel that he dug, and he had like this lair with all these weird stuff like people with their like he killed people and cut off their legs and walk around in their skin and stuff. God, was it Sparkles or something? I have to-
that sounds
Yeah, pretty ridiculous.
messed up.
Pretty messed up. I'm gonna look right now. There it is. It's Mr. Pickles. That's what it is. Pretty raunchy.
You ever watch Seinfeld?
Oh yeah,
Isn't that the name of the puppet in Kramer's apartment?
Mr. Pickles.
Maybe? He's
Could be.
got. They put in the chicken place across the street, and the red light keeps Kramer up at night, and so Jerry and Kramer switch apartments, and they turn into each other.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah,
I've
that's
watched
that
all
was
those runs.
that was a pretty funny series.
Yeah,
It's got some degeneracy, but
yeah.
solid laugh.
Yeah.
I've been trying to hit the history books more than the play button.
Yeah, it's a good
Recently.
call.
I was thinking about that recently, just with comic books and everything, even just fiction in general. Fiction itself, I was looking into the history of it, trying to figure out when it really started to catch on, and it wasn't, I think, until like the 18th or 19th century that common people started to really understand, like, okay, it's written in the book, but it's not true. They're like, people knew that, I guess, fiction was a thing, but apparently the common people didn't. And so if it was written in a book, it was law. It was absolutely true. Things wouldn't be written down if they weren't true. Everything on the internet is trustable.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be immortalizing a lie if it wasn't true when you wrote it down.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting when you think about old legends and folklore and stories about gods and stuff. Maybe it was a lot more true than they want us to think.
Right. And also a lot of it is just kind of distorted, like fishing tales. It's what it really looks like is what happened. I think Fomenko describes it really well. This idea of once you have the basics down, you can kind of trace where some of these main events happened, and the documents spread out with the people, the stories and the documents themselves spread across the world. And in different parts of the world, it got recorded differently. So, for example, I was just listening to this podcast, Mythology is what they call themselves. And they narrate old myths from antiquity, ancient myths. And they did a myth recently on Anansi. SB Alger, I think you commented on the post saying that they're trying to get us to download Podcoin. That was the
Yeah,
app
yeah.
I was using.
Yeah.
They're shutting that app down. So if you did download it, it's not even worth it because it's about to go. It's about to be shut down.
I
But
would, but I just don't have enough room. I mean, I'm playing musical chairs because I need to get a new phone, and I'm just like, I don't want to pay more money, and my phone works good enough, but it's only 32 gig, and so as you can imagine, I don't. Every time they update, their OS takes up more room, and so I just have to like bounce everything out and use my SD card relentlessly for any storage. But yeah, that's so they're gonna pull it down. That's too bad. It sounded like an interesting idea because you got paid to listen. You said.
yeah, I mean, it's very, very small amounts, like fractions of a penny for a while. Like I was on there listening almost every day for like a month or 2 or 3, and I had almost gotten enough for $2 back. But
Yeah.
it's still $2,
Yeah.
that's in my pocket. Like, but I ended up, they had an option to donate, so I donated to try and save the rainforest, all my points. But then a message popped up saying that they're not affiliated with any charity organizations, and so I was just like,
That's funny.
I hope I'm saving the rainforest, but who knows? Podcoin. But yeah, so what I was saying was the story about Anansi is this spider god. And it's kind of cool how we were able to jump around with this freeform talk that we're having.
Yeah, for sure.
I just even mentioned comic books a second ago to Jim, and how I've been kind of thinking about why we know more fiction than we know reality. Like right now, I could probably name more facts about Pokemon than I could about classical mythology. But I don't know. It'd kind of be a cool video to do. You know, if you had like a counter and you could each fact you named, you would tally up a point, and then for one subject, and then do it on the next.
Like a contest almost.
Yeah, to test yourself. But I just wonder, like potentially, like people know more about like fiction, like Harry Potter. There's probably some people out there that know so much about Harry Potter, and they don't even know when the Constitution was signed or when it went into effect or something.
Yeah, they might not even know what states are on their own borders.
They don't even know what language the Magna Carta is in. Yeah, what's the Constitution? So yeah, I was thinking about that, and then yeah, just trying to focus more on what's real and tangible and what really happened instead of filling myself with fiction. And so yeah, that's what we were talking about. Comic books. Spider-Man is allegedly based off of this Anansi character, or he's based off of this archetypal spider god type character.
Yeah, I know him from Neil Gaiman's American Gods. He's one of the main characters.
You've looked into that?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's kind of cool. Like, it's based on reality, but you could know a ton about Spider-Man and not know anything about the actual history behind the character, why he developed, why he has the powers he has, and all that kind of stuff. So it was kind of interesting. But looking into this, we were talking about the expansion of the empire and the transmission of information and the telephone game, and this story Anansi on this mythology podcast just happened. It was like, dude, it was like listening to the same story that I've read 1,000 times now. Like, they have all the key characters, the same plots. I think it even goes over one of the same stories twice in a row of Adam and Eve, or Christ, or Lucifer, the heavenly celestial bodies getting kicked from heaven, and they have to toil and torment on the earth. So at first he got kicked out of heaven to go mingle with the humans, and then he got cursed and he had to become a human in the story. And I think it's a trickster god impregnates this woman named Akono Rhea, which the emphasis is on Rhea and Maya and Maya and Mary, and just the typical mother goddess that gives birth to a demigod who has a husband, and the husband has to raise this demigod child, even though it's not his own. And so it's obviously the story of the gospel of Mary and Joseph and Christ being born, because these are supposedly ancient stories. And everybody in the ancient time is independent and they haven't been in contact with each other, they know anything about each other, they're not all going to come up with the same story independently unless it really is like a trippy collective consciousness where, you know, all the planets lined up and we started collectively across the globe creating spider myths and spider cults.
Yeah, get that download. You know, the moon lines up
independently of
just
each
right.
other with similar stories. Yeah, the tide was just perfect. So yeah, I don't know. Potentially that could be the explanation, but I think expansion of the empire and transmission of the documents is more likely. And I'm even open, you know, if somebody ends up debunking Fomenko, I would still look into that, the cross comparison of cultures, because I don't think that can be ignored. That there's a much more cohesive civilization that we're looking at than the independent theories that have come out. You know, people built pyramids because they're the easiest structure to build, you know, big base, tiny top. Just ended up stacking stuff like that independent of each other. And, you know, they all put 3 doors on the entrances to their pyramid temples because why not put 3? That's just a good number to put. And also the dimensions of the pyramids are almost exactly the same. And, you know, those are just good dimensions to have. We just independently came up with all these things.
You know, that's
And
making me think.
origin stories.
It's making me think of some of the stuff that we talked about when we were doing, like, we didn't really do any prep, folks, but we had a brief conversation, you know, hey, how are you, what's up? And you were talking about the fact that you have kind of doubled down on your regular skills that you already had from school so that you could do a better job of understanding what Fomenko is saying. So you were telling me that math and astronomy were both things that you're looking at. It made me think of this because you said maybe someone will come along and debunk Fomenko, which they might be able to debunk some of his speculation or a few small minor points, but from what I've seen, I don't think they can just throw it completely out. There's no way to turn it inside out, you know, especially when you've got Robert Newton, the main guy, that he's looking at his work and the work on the eclipses of the moon. And what you said right before we started was that they called it a non-gravitational impact, like, so asteroids hit the moon and slowed it down, and that explains why the moon does or doesn't line up with the chronological record or whatever, right? Like a completely way out of left field, insane answer explaining something that should be like the most important and foundational piece of how we know where we are and when we are, you know, if we're talking about chronology. So that's just, I don't think they can easily debunk it. I think you're right. I think there's evidence everywhere once you open your eyes, especially in the architecture, of some kind of unified culture. And it wasn't a unified primitive culture like the Aboriginals. It was sophisticated, full of architecture, full of technologies and stuff, you know?
These people with their mud huts, they came out with their stone tools and created the Great Pyramid of Giza.
Right, yeah, that's just insane.
No, that's not what they're arguing, but you know, it's kind of
It's
like
close,
that.
though.
Yeah, it's kind of the argument of absurdity. You know, this culture completely formed. This isolated, independent culture, Egyptian culture, spent all their resources of their kingdom to build massive graves, and basically all they did their whole lives was prep for the grave. And
Yeah.
I mean, potentially, you know, it's a viable argument that you had a cult of the dead and every single thing that they did in their life was to prepare for the next. I think that some people still live like that today. You know, everything that they do, they're waiting to be judged by God as soon as they die.
Yeah.
So they're trying to live a good life. But the amount of resources that it would take, you know, it's just some of the stuff, like the calculations that they try to do on how long it would take to make some of these things, or what kind of manpower you would need. The running theory is that they chiseled out the bricks at the quarry and then dragged them to the pyramid instead of making it on the spot with a geopolymer concrete.
Here.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, they got 40,000 people to pull this big block of stone, and then they lifted it up.
Yeah,
And
all behind whips, getting whipped. while they're doing it, and starved.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of the main arguments against Fomenko is that science has no place in history. That history is it's a product of the humanities. It's not a science. It's an investigation in the humanities and human history. But then I find that those same people say, well, what about radiocarbon dating? They want to use sciences to try and support their history, but they don't want to use the other sciences because they contradict their history. Like I don't know if this was on film or not, but I was mentioning how the scholars, they disregard the calibrated dates, the ones that are supposedly more accurate, because they disagree with the timeline. It throws a monkey wrench in their idea. With radiocarbon aside, to bring up the moon, I don't think we've talked about that much on this video, but astronomy, I want to get in contact with more astronomers, or potentially when I get this new PC to run some astronomy programs to try and track the moon to see if these eclipses would be accurate. Because what Fomenko did is he noticed that there was an issue. So this is what the thing is with Robert Newton. He tracks based off of the works of Opelzer and someone else. I can't remember off the top of my head. They had like 89 ancient eclipses with their sources, and then Robert Newton went back in and used those plus a bunch of medieval ones to track the motion of the moon around the Earth. The speed of it, I think, is what it is. And what he found is that basically around 400 to 600, a drop in the speed of the moon starts to occur. And then between 600 and 1,000, it steadily drops. It's a square wave on the chart. So a square wave would be like, if this is a straight line across, it would do a square, like a right angle here and then a right angle there.
Right.
And so what was found is from Fomenko is that around 1100, the dates become more or less consistent with today's dates, and after 1300, the eclipses are exactly how they would be if the motion of the moon was consistent throughout the time. So from 1300 to present, we have accurate records of the eclipses that took place. Prior to that, there's a ton of movement and a lot of changes and variation between 8000 BC to 1000 AD. There's quite a lot. And so what was going on is that some of these people were dating the ancient eclipses, and they were discovering that there was no eclipse that could have happened at that time. So astronomically speaking, the 3 eclipses in the Peloponnesian War by Thucydides, I think I'm citing that right, those could not have happened at the time that historians say they happened, astronomically speaking, unless there was some sort of unrecorded, unknown, potentially non-gravitational impact that hit the moon and slowed it down a lot, and that's why it's off course from what it would be. Or potentially it was that it happened in the 12th century when the eclipse could have actually happened. There were 2 solutions, and one was 11th and one was 12th, and the 12th century one was more accurate. So it's reason to say that the people that recorded these 3 eclipses were recording real eclipses, but they happened in the 12th century AD and not, I think, the 6th or 8th century BC when that's being recorded. And so it's a solid science. But then again, we were also talking before the show, it's all based off of math and projections. And we can track the stars across the sky, and we create a mathematical formula to represent that, and then trace them backwards in time to be able to tell where they would have been. And if there were non-gravitational impacts, then we would have no way of knowing that, because it's not recorded in any history that a massive rock hit the moon and now the days are shorter or something. But it's astronomy, so I just want to get into it more.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
and like I was saying in earlier before we got live, that, I mean, is it like every time something hits the moon that it changes its that it slows down or speeds up or moves directions? There's
Yeah,
a
right.
lot of craters on the moon. It looks like it's been hit a bunch of times, unless they all happened at once. It seems like if it's going to affect it, it would affect it every time something smashes into it. But that's not
Yeah,
really
that's a
what
good
we see.
point. And so how hard of a hit would you have to slow the moon down? Like
Yeah.
it'd have to be like a barrage of a bunch of little ones, or maybe on the dark side of the moon there's just a massive crater
Yeah, that would make sense.
just out of sight.
The moon on the backside just looks like a ping pong ball that somebody stepped on, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a deflated ping pong ball.
So now it's
There is
interesting
no
that we end up on the moon again this week. Now last week, me and Jim, we went over square flat Earth, which is a pretty rare subject. People, you don't find a lot of stuff on the square theory. But one of the main things I tell people is to start watching the moon every single night when you can, and you'll start to see phenomenon that you can't really explain very easily on any model. So you'd think before there was technology and before there was the advances that we have now, that people would do this naturally anyway because there's not really anything else to do. Like I've got a friend who has a grandson who's just a boy, he's not even 2, and he's obsessed with the moon, man. If the sun is down, he is looking actively for the moon. He wants to see it, And I've always been that way. I always go step around the corner of the house and look up and see if I can see the moon. Anytime I'm outside and I think there's moonlight, I try and get my eyes on the moon. So you'd think they would have noticed. First and foremost, they would have at least been watching the moon. But if it changed catastrophically, there'd be record of it. And there is. That's why there's record of eclipses, because that's something that's super wow. Like, what the hell's happening to the moon, right?
right.
Now, do you know if there's any other guys other than Robert Newton that independently came up with a similar theory? Or is he just the one guy and then everyone agreed with him? Or I guess I need to look at this guy, Robert Newton, a little bit.
I've looked into it a bit to try and find other people who have done it, and it's just one of those things that I'm like, I would think that more people would be looking into this. Like, we have how many astronomers in the world, and we don't have answers that are quite legitimate or even free information that explains exactly why. Like, that's why I'm hoping with this new computer it'll be able to run some of these programs, because I want to do it. I want to check it out and see if it's possible, and run in different factors and scenarios and then post it for people to look at.
Yeah.
I just think it'd be a lot of fun, and that I'm not even doing it for the prestige and saying like, oh yeah, I did that. That was the first guy. I'm doing it because nobody else has yet.
Yeah, to increase the
Just want
conversation
to
for
see
everybody.
it.
Yeah. Now
And if
that's-
somebody else could do it, that'd be great, so that I can focus on the stuff that I really want to focus on, which is the manuscripts and the textual histories. But I might just have to get. So yeah, I was talking about potentially getting a college degree, and that's why I just haven't yet, is that I can't decide on what I want to do. I'd want to go and get a degree in physics, but I'd also want to get a degree in classical studies and a degree in mathematics and medieval studies and Egyptology and codicology and just about every study that you could come up with, and just to be able to talk to people that have degrees in those, because from what I've seen so far, it seems like if you have a degree in it, I don't know, anyone that's listening to this, if you have a degree, I hope that you don't go and just ignore everyone that doesn't have a degree that's asking questions about it that potentially might challenge your degree. That I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of financial investment, and people are, if they get challenged on it, they think, oh no, I couldn't have wasted 150 grand to get this certificate that qualifies me as a master's in classical studies. What do you mean the earliest text of Homer's Iliad? What does that matter? Like, it's kind of weird.
No, we totally feel where you're at, and I want to encourage you, man. I don't think you necessarily need to go to college, but you're a smart guy. So all that stuff that you mentioned, if you keep applying yourself to it, I think you'll be an endless resource to the human beings around you, especially if you keep posting it on the web where we can find it, because we need guys like you that are willing to. That's the way I look at all this kind of research too. All conspiracy type stuff is I feel like I'm always trying to build a big picture. And I know that really I should focus on one thing, like I should choose something and just do that, because that's where I'm going to make real progress. But what I want is to understand the whole picture. And me and Jim have been talking about this with the Flat Earth episode last week, and just in general, that finding this kind of information, it doesn't matter if it's chronology, history, or other subjects, it like lights the fire back in your mind to be hungry and excited to find knowledge. When before I woke up to the Flat Earth, like in 2015, I wasn't studying anything to do with the sky. You know, I might go outside and look at the moon when it comes from behind a cloud, but I wasn't tracking it every day and thinking about where it was going to be the next night. And, you know, I see that same fire on you that, like, wait, if history's off, then it, like, turns your brain on to investigate everything and to care a lot more, I guess is the easy way to say it, you know?
I got into all this because I was interested in epistemology and at least theology, and I just couldn't find any information about like, I guess there's a lot of reading material for epistemology, but it wasn't as like in depth as I wanted. Like the epistemology of historical studies, I guess, is what I really wanted to know. Like, how do we go about really understanding and investigating into these different arenas of history? And it just seems like a lot of them are just biased, and they were formed at a time when people weren't really focused on logic and reason. They were sort of just going with their gut feelings. I posted a quote recently of Thomas Jefferson to John Adams, and he's making fun of all his contemporaries for the ideas that they have for the origins of Native Americans. And I kind of relate to it, but at the same time, every time that I laugh about something or I make something out to seem absurd, I kind of have to take it with a grain of salt, because what I'm saying could be absurd to someone, you know? And the idea isn't to try and alienate each other's theories and to make them seem absurd, because I think people probably have good reasons to believe what they believe, but to get a more comprehensive and collective effort to really get down to the truth, which is, theology is the study of the nature of truth. And I just can't imagine looking into stuff to try and say that something's true and you don't understand what epistemology is, which is the study of knowledge, or much less theology, which is the study of truth. I just can't imagine how on point you're going to be with your research or your critical thinking if that's not the center of your focus, is to try and represent reality with a model that's as accurate as humanly possible.
Yeah, here, man. And that's I put epistemology up on the screen just in case people didn't know, you know. So
yeah, those are the kinds of questions. Those are the questions that I ask, you know. When I was looking into the pineapple thing, I'm like, well, how do we know that's from Pompeii? And so I looked it up and I was looking into it, and sure enough, it really does appear to be from the house of Ephebes, the pineapple thing. So I went about trying to confirm it, you know, and there was an article that got posted today about the Etruscans actually being fully black people. Black people brought culture and society to the Romans in the 8th century BC, and it got shared like 500 times, and the whole article was just slander against white people. It was all about how great the black people were and how evil white people are, but then the author of the article didn't know that all the dates that they were using were created by white people. And so in one breath, they're saying the white people have fabricated everything and stolen our history from us, but they gave us the right dates for when all this stuff happened.
Right, their foundation is flawed. Their foundational logic is flawed.
There's I don't want to say his name just because he's kind of, I don't really care for him at all, and I don't want to talk bad about him, but he's a great example for this. I pissed him off by asking, he posted on YouTube stating that Fomenko is a government agent, period. That was his claim. And I just was wondering why he thought that, because and I was wondering why he thought that, so I just asked him. And typically if someone ignores my question, I only will ask you 3 times, and then I'll just give up. I'll be like, okay, well, they ignored me 3 times. No, that's enough. I'm not going to keep bugging them about it. And on the 3rd time that I asked him, eventually he responded, and he started to get pissed, and he went and did a video about Fomenko being a government agent. And one of the funniest parts from it was that he claimed that all the professors at Moscow State University are paid for by the government, and they're government agents, and they're not to be trusted, and you can't trust them. And then later on in the video, he said he was trying to say that the professors at Moscow State University have already debunked Fomenko, and they don't approve of what he says, and so even his own colleagues are against him. But it was the people that he said were liars and couldn't be trusted were the people he was sourcing as debunking Fomenko and proving he was a government agent. I was like, are you kidding me right now?
Yeah,
This
we
is
see
your
it all the
argument?
time nowadays. We see it all the time, don't we? That someone contradicts themselves before they can get to the end of their thought. They don't understand what fallacies or contradictions are.
Yeah, it's wild.
Did I tell you about the quote I saw from the... Steven, I saw a quote on Twitter, and I saved it as a screen capture. It's the editor of Black's Law Dictionary, and he said something like, "Aha, I figured it out. We've transferred out of the information age and into the disinformation age." And I think it's unfortunate, but I think that's accurate, you know. And he's got the authority to say so because he's a lawyer that's editing the most preeminent legal dictionary in the world. And so when he says, "Oh my gosh, I think we left the information age and entered into the disinformation age," it means something different, you know. But it's so
I know
true.
what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's so true. The whole fake news thing is real. And I think they did it on purpose, you know.
But you got to ask yourself, is that disinformation? Are we really in the disinformation age? Because I think about this quite a bit too, and I think that there's more information available to me right now than there has ever been available in the history of humankind. My ability as basically just like, I'm basically just getting by. I don't have a whole lot of extra money to go and do like fun stuff or like take vacations and stuff, much less buy expensive books and get expensive degrees and stuff. And so I would consider myself financially quite lower in society, and the information that I have available to me comparatively in the past, you know, with someone of my financial situation, I would have had to go to the library to use their books. I wouldn't be able to own anything myself. There definitely was no internet. I wouldn't be able to just go on the internet and, like you've been doing, you know, type in Aboriginal pineapple and sure enough stuff pops up with that. Like, there's more information at our fingertips than there's ever been before, and that's why I think about fiction a bit. It's like, with all this information, we also have the ability to saturate ourselves with lies and fiction, and it's a conscious choice to be able to search out something and to stay focused on pursuing something in reality. And I think that's what originally college degrees were about, was seeking out that knowledge and getting a degree to show that you've sought out the knowledge and you're competent in the subject. But now I had somebody that I was talking to for a while. He's getting his master's in classical studies. He doesn't even know the names of the manuscripts that I used for the modern translations. And I just can't imagine teaching a class and not telling them what the manuscripts that we're basing our translations on are, if the professors even know what they are. That's like the pivotal point. And I just don't think that they even talk about it because they're medieval manuscripts. They're not from late antiquity or classical times.
Right.
They're outside of that study. And so we have all these, basically every single ancient stories appears on paper and in text after 900 to 1000 on our traditional timeline, and a lot later on the new chronology. Even on the traditional timeline, they're dated to the 1000 mark, but they appear and they're named after people that were in the 1600s. They appear in the 1800s in church pews and stuff. So I just can't imagine. I just can't wait to get totally familiar with just about every primary manuscript that's out there, and then have like a radio show where I have scholars try and call in. I just can't imagine getting scholars to call in to try and challenge me. Like, I watched The Atheist Experience, and they have like callers come in to try and challenge them about God and stuff. You know, I've got a really good argument for God. You know, the sun rises and sets, and we're perfectly away from the sun, so gods exist, and stuff like that. And I want to get like a radio show going where I just get scholars to call in, and I would like have a whole list of topics on my website that they can pick from that they think that they can argue against. So maybe I'll get somebody to call in and really give me a solid argument.
I don't know
Being
if
an
they'll call
artichoke.
you, though.
See, that's the thing, is that you wouldn't want to embarrass yourself, so you could do it anonymously.
Yeah.
Hopefully none of your colleagues recognize your voice, but it just seems like it'd be really embarrassing to go on with a master's degree and then get schooled by a kid with a laptop and internet connection.
Yeah, I think, bringing that back to where you first started, I think you're totally right, man. I think they are saturating the news feeds with disinformation on purpose, like with really shitty propaganda, like all the back and forth CNN versus Trump crap. I think that's just a way for them to make us believe that information is not as trustworthy as it really is, because if everyone is comfortable in believing that really high quality information is available at their fingertips all the time, then they realize how much more powerful they are. Because you're right, we are super powerful. While you were talking, I found a weird picture, and as I'm listening to you and trying to figure it out at the same time, it's like a model of a liver. Did you see the picture up there? It's like this weird thing. It looks like it's got writing all over it. I'll see if I can go back up to it here and put it back up there. Let me see if I can find it. But so it's under Etruscans. I started looking for Etruscans, right? And there's this thing here. I'll put it back up on the screen now. It'll take a second. But I had to go to the web page because I just had the picture up there. And they use livers, like your internal organ, as a form of divination. So this is a model of a liver that you can use as like your handy reference, And we'd have never been able to figure that out. We'd have never come that far. I figured all that out while I was dividing my attention between listening to you live on the internet, It's just crazy. Oh, we lost your mic, bro.
Hello?
Yep, there you go.
Hey, so, oh yeah, here it is. I'm looking at it. Oh yeah, it's supposed to be a liver?
Yeah, it's a liver, yeah. And,
Not bad.
yeah, I mean, that's...
So yeah, there's some comments in the chat here about the Etruscans. I had mentioned that article. I didn't mean to bring that up to say that that Etruscans were actually white people and that the guy is just totally a lunatic. From what I can tell, the Etruscans were a mixed population. They had multiple different types of people with lighter skin and darker skin, and this culture was not around from 800 to 200 or the 8th to 2nd century BC, but from around the 13 to 1500s AD is when the Etruscans were around, and they were a mixed population that lived together. It wasn't just all white people or all black people. There were a lot of different types of people that were living there. I think even across the whole country, potentially, of Tartaria or the Great Empire, there were people, multiple different types of people living together. The idea of races and segregation and stuff like that, I don't think was really solidified until the 1700s. But yeah, it's definitely worth looking into. There's just so much stuff. I just can't wait to look into it all.
No, I agree with that, what you just said, because when you get to looking at all this old art, especially Egypt is a pretty good example, there's the same thing that you described just now, is that it seems like pretty evenly represented, the types of people, and you can see from the tone of their skin, the type of clothes they're wearing, the position they might be standing in, that you can interpret a lot about their culture, where they're from. They don't wear identical outfits, they're not the same color, and it seems to me like both racism and sexism are pretty new inventions based on just studying art and reading like quotes from back in the day and stuff too. Even not that old. I'm just talking about like from the 1800s. They make it seem like men have just ruled over women with an iron fist. But if you go look and read, they give women lots of credit, and they might not be even and have the same legal rights or whatever, but they still respect them and they have them in positions of power and leadership. And I'd say the same thing about people of different colors. I think it's a pretty new thing. Racism and sexism, I think it's a new tool they came up with in the last 200 or 300 years to divide us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It definitely looks like men and women were treated fairly equal throughout the early empire, at least. You know, you didn't have the Mother Mary of God as, you know, just being totally insolent. Like, the women, they had their place in the society, and it wasn't as subordinates to men. They were rulers too. They had queens. The three magi that visit Christ when he's born potentially was originally two kings and a queen, or a king, a queen, and their head guard.
Interesting.
And yeah, actually, I have that on my Fomenko studies group. I gotta get going here in like 20 minutes, 15 minutes, but if you want to pull that up, we could just talk about that real quick.
Yeah,
that was one of the first things I started posting. Before I went and made my website, I was starting to post photo albums on Facebook, and I didn't want everything on the photo albums to get totally destroyed in case someone flagged them or Facebook shuts down or they ban my group for whatever reason. So I started making my website because it's a little harder to shut a website down.
Right.
I'll have to write an article about those, but they're under the album section, the three magi. I think it should be easy to find.
Yeah, I'm going to photos now, so I'll get us there. And under albums.
So yeah, the one thing on the Etruscans, I was reading the chat, it says it's allegedly undecipherable, but if you try to decipher it with the idea that it's based on a Slavonic language, it is decipherable, and you could read it because it's based on Slavonic. It's a Slavic language, and it kind of puts a lot of pieces together too, because it even looks Slavonic once you make the connection there. So,
what language are you talking about again?
Etruscan?
Etruscan.
Etruscan.
Supposedly it's undecipherable and nobody knows really what it's based on, but when you know that it's based on Slavonic, it's obvious. Like, when you know that the painting is based on a pineapple, it's obvious that it's not.
Yeah.
That it's not an artichoke, god damn it. Pardon me.
Yeah.
So I'm on the three magi page. I don't know if it's popped up for you yet there, Stephen. And we acknowledge and understand after this that you've got to go. We've got some stuff that we want to talk about, the memorial fund for Tracy after you go, so it's fine. So, you know, no pressure. Just let us know when this is done, and we'll get you a kind farewell.
So go ahead and just go to that first picture there on the top left.
Okay.
I included the titles to some of these, but I think some of them are still untitled. I think on that top left one here, I'm just going to go to Facebook so that there's no lag, and we can just go clip by clip here real quick.
I'm on the top left one now, so as soon as you catch up, just go right ahead. And if you want, just tell me when you're moving on, and I'll click.
Here we go. So on that top left one, the three magi are you can see it's a engraving of sorts. You can see Joseph on the far right. Mary is holding baby Jesus. And the one magi is on his knees in front of Christ. He's bowing to him and praying. He's got a bald head. This is important. He's an older man. He is the guard, the army general. The younger man behind him with the golden cup is one of the magi. He is, I think, the prince or a king. I think he's the prince, the son of this, maybe the queen, but I'll have to go back and look over this. It's been like half a year since I've looked into this, but that's obviously a man with a beard. You can notice the bald man has a long beard, and then there's a woman right next to him holding another gift for baby Jesus there. And that is the queen. And so it was originally supposedly three white people. The new chronology, I think, maintains that white people were the ones that brought civilization to the rest of the world, that they were the ones to first develop the sciences and technologies. I think that there is some evidence to support it, but at the same time, there were also important other people too. Like on this picture, you can see I think it's a black man right behind the woman,
Yeah.
right there. So it's kind of interesting, some of the ideas on who was first to do some of this stuff. But all right, let's go to the second picture real quick. So are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Perfect. So here we see another old man kneeling down to give a gift to little baby Jesus there. And we have another man to the left, a black man. And this is how this happens, is that first it was a white woman and two white men. And then the word for woman, beautiful, got mistranslated as black or something similar to that. I'll have to write a paper on this so that it's all clear and concise. But the word got mistranslated in the papers, and so when the people were reading the papers to create art to represent what they had read, they mistranslated it, and eventually it was depicting a black woman. So it went from a white woman to a black woman that was with them. And then after that happened, it became a black man. And so this would be considered based off of a later text, because it's obviously a black man. I think he even has a beard on him.
Yeah, he's got a small beard. I just looked real close to see. He's got like the chin strap going on there.
And then you can see on the right, there's another man who's holding a gift for little baby Jesus. He's wearing like red tights and a green shirt with a gold cape on.
Right.
And so those would be the three magi of this piece of art. So you go to the next piece of art, and potentially that is the black woman.
Okay.
She doesn't have a beard. She's wearing a dress. Then you see the man in the back. He's kneeling, and both the men are bearded. And again, it's a younger man and an older man. I think that stays fairly consistent throughout the art. There's usually a younger and an older man, and then the variable of a white or black woman or a black man. So if you go to the next one, it's in the middle. It's like I think a bas relief is what it's called. They sculpted it.
Okay, so I keep going here. Let's there we go. A bas relief, and it's they're all three in like equal sized proportion.
Yeah, you see them.
Yeah, they've got.
It's really simple,
behind them.
but so yeah, you can't really tell the gender on these, but they all appear to be at least potentially white people, and potentially one of them could be a female, but that's obviously a really old piece of art, because you can tell they have a hard time depicting the hands. He's pointing at the star behind Mary, but his fingernail's on the wrong side. So yeah, that's one of them. Go to the next picture. You can see that this is clearly two men and a woman coming to visit little baby Jesus. Little 8-ounce baby Jesus.
Yeah,
the woman is on the far right. She has no beard.
So yeah, she's a black woman too.
No, she's white on this next picture.
Let's see. Maybe
I don't know if we're looking at the same one. She's wearing a red coat. She's standing next to a king in a golden coat, and then a man on the left. There's some goats on the ground. Which image are you on? I'm on 5 of 27.
I went back because when I clicked from the bas relief, it was like kind of a bluish screen with angels. So you said you're on 5? Yeah, it must be the same one right there, huh?
Mary's wearing a black coat. She's laying down.
No, here, let me go back and get it. Okay, I see it now.
Image 8 of 27. You can see that it's a later painting, and it's a very overweight black man with a beard, clearly coming to visit Mary Jesus or little baby Jesus. And then you can see the other wise man is he's a very old man. He's on his knees, I think. And the last wise man is behind that guy, who's also very old, but he's bald. He's much older than the guy on his knees in white. It's a very detailed painting.
Yeah, I see.
This is also the origin of the holy cow. Sacred cow. The saying is because of this story. It's huge that the cow was present at Christ's birth. But yeah, you can look through all these pictures. You'll see a ton of different variations. Typically, it's an old man, a younger man, and then the variable.
Yeah, and that's interesting that it's not only a variable between gender, but also between ethnicity. So that's fascinating.
Right. Yeah. So that's again just trying to kind of. I think that it's based off of the texts, and so what happens is that the stories get transmitted. The people either read the text or they carry on the tradition orally, and then it's like telephone, and it gets distorted a little bit. And so it starts out as a beautiful queen and a king and his guard, and it gets translated into 3 very wise people. And then the specifics are different here and there,
Yeah.
So
just like listening to old men tell a story, right? Like, they were both in the same place and it was 10 years ago, but one guy tells the story really dry and straight, like completely scientific recall, and then the other guy, who's maybe more like me, is exaggerating and adding detail and embellishing, and so of course the artists are going to do that when they're creating from a text. They want their painting they want it to work, to have an impact on the people looking at it. And so they take a little bit of liberty, right?
Right. Oh, yeah, that's what the word is, liberty. Artistic liberty,
Yeah.
or artistic license. That's what people try to say is the pine cone. The artist was taking artistic liberties. he was just experimenting.
Yeah, let's just throw this pine cone. I don't even know if it is a pine cone. Maybe they accidentally picked one that looks just like the real thing, right? Because of their artistic liberties.
So yeah, it's pretty funny.
It is crazy.
I don't know.
Steven, I want to thank you a ton for coming back on short notice. I really enjoyed letting this just roll wide open and kind of, not having an outline is nice sometimes. I want to encourage people to go to chronologytruth.wordpress.com and please look around there. He's done a ton of work, folks, a ton of work. There's a lot of information here. There's information on the Facebook groups. There's beautiful posts on the Instagram page. And I would say if you're really enjoying this topic, please don't hesitate to go over to Steven's Patreon and sign yourself up, even for the $20 amount. And if you do that, don't forget to ask for a specific favor on an article title and subject, because that is the offer still on the table from Steven at this time. So
I've got an option for you to go and subscribe for $1 a month. And as soon as I get this new computer, I'm ending my base group. So I've got a special going for you. If you want to sign up before I get this new computer, it's only $1 a month, and you'll get lifelong benefits and recognition as somebody that signed up prior to when I got an equipment upgrade and really started pumping out a ton of information. So if you like that sort of thing, and you want to be able to say, yeah, I was a patron of this guy before he even had a good computer to put videos out, and now he's got 100,000 subscribers, and he's the sole authority on pineapples in Pompeii.
Well,
But yeah,
I'm literally
for sure
doing
check
that
that
right
out.
now as we speak. I'm going to sign up right now as we speak. I'm confirming. So there we go. I am officially signed up as a $1, and maybe I'll PayPal you $20 or $40, and we'll talk about an article or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I figure I'm only going to have less than 10 or 20 people that get in before I get this new computer, and I figure I'll be sending you guys like free clothing and stuff. Eventually I want to like have Chronology Truth t-shirts or like hats or like fridge magnets and stuff, so you guys will always get in on that. And potentially I'll even do like a custom, I'm going to call it the soapbox era, because I'm like basically all I got is like a soapbox that I'm standing on right now talking about this kind of thing. And so you guys will always be in the soapbox group.
I like
where
the
you
idea
guys,
of you on a soapbox holding up a pine cone and a pineapple, and an audience
Yeah.
standing there thinking, the three wise men are examining. That's good.
they're like, I can't tell the one from the other.
Yeah.
What
Which
is he
one?
holding in which hand?
Which one can we eat? Hand them over.
Yeah, well, SB, thanks for having me on again. Jim, it's been a pleasure. You guys are a lot of fun to chat with. I'm looking forward to next time. I'll definitely have to keep in touch.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch your show occasionally, but definitely, it's been a lot of fun.
It's gonna be earlier probably from now on, so maybe that'll afford you more time to watch. So.
Yeah, last time I was pretty sleepy. This time I've got plenty of energy. So, yeah. Also, before I go, I was gonna say this. I told myself I'd say this on the next time I was on your show, but I've thought over the book thing, and I think writing a book is probably a good idea. I know I said I wouldn't do it last time, but I've thought it over, and I think book writing is definitely the way to go because I can get all my thoughts in a solid book. I started getting to the point where my articles were piling up, and I'm like, I could make a book out of this.
Yep.
You know, I might as well. Since I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to know what's not been published yet. So
Yeah.
I'll be able to publish some new stuff that people don't know about, like the pineapple thing.
Yeah.
I could write a whole book on that. I didn't even talk to you guys about maps tonight, but I've spent probably more time studying the maps than I have on anything for Pompeii.
Well,
I could talk about that for another 2 hours.
Let's take that as a preliminary hint at what we'll do next time, and maybe we'll bring some maps and some ideas on cartography of our own, and we'll throw together at least a loose outline, and we'll talk about maps next time you come back, Stephen.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. All right, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, I'm just going to let you click the button. I'm not going to boot you. If you just
All right, take care.
Hey, have a great night. Okay, bye, Stephen.
Okay, bye, Stephen.
There you went.
That was awesome.
Yeah, that was great. I'm glad this worked out. A lot of what we do here at Picture Show is to just be bold to the point where you take a risk. We could have really sacrificed a whole episode to not knowing what the hell we were doing, but usually our faith and maybe my overconfidence makes it work out.
Yeah, that's awesome.
That was a great
I
show.
hope
I'm
you're
very
excited.
happy, yeah. And we're still almost to 3 hours here anyway, which is usually about how long we go, so I'm not complaining.
Do you want to talk about a couple of other things, perhaps?
We can, but I wanted to make sure that people know. I'm going to go copy the link and drop the link for the GoFundMe. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally did get a little bit more information rolling around about our dearly departed friend, Tracy Twyman. And one thing that's happening behind the scenes with people that were friends with her in the local area where she lived is they are organizing to get a proper headstone for her grave. And there is a GoFundMe that was just published today, and there's an amount they're trying to hit there, which is pretty close to probably what they'll need to get a proper, like, let's see, you can go read it for yourself, but it says all the typical right things, like that she was a mother and a friend and a researcher, and I think they're trying to put the Cross of Lorraine, which there's a lot of pictures with Tracy wearing a necklace, especially when she was younger, of the Cross of Lorraine, which is like a cross with two T's, it's crossed twice. And the reason I started to say that was because any money above and beyond the amount is going to go to Tracy's family. And so please, we encourage you to jump on here. I'm going to paste the link in the chat right now, and then I'm going to take us to the page 2 here. Let's see. Let me paste it. Let's see if that pops up. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit smaller here. The expert in pineapples from Pompeii. Okay, so here's Tracy. Hi, Tracy. We miss you. And here I'm going to paste the link also in the chat for us here. If I can find the chat again. Jim, did you move the chat? Just kidding.
I'm hiding the chat. Oh wait, it's over here. It's on my computer.
So there's the link. See, I'll post it 2 or 3 times so it's easy to hit. Now that should be in the chat also. This link is also in the description of this show. Obviously, you can find it pretty easy too if you just go search Tracy Twyman headstone or Tracy Twyman GoFundMe. And we are still patiently waiting and hoping to get more information since we're still kind of up in the air with everything. No real answers. There are things going on behind the scenes. I know I keep telling you guys that. I'm praying for the day when I have something that, that A, we know is true, and B, that it's okay to publish and talk about it without potentially infringing on, other people's privacy or, especially, I'm waiting so long because I want to know. I've seen lots and lots of speculation, and I'm not willing to do that surrounding the death of our friend. Once we get something that looks like real life, we get actual documents from the authorities involved or from people that we can trust, like, if Clyde Lewis wanted to send me something, or I would probably trust him. But so we're still just patiently waiting. We do intend to eventually do like a full memorial episode of Picture Show, and Jim and I were talking about it last week, and it feels like we're just now starting to heal enough that that's something that we could put on the table. I'm not ready to schedule it for next week or even the week after that necessarily, but I am. My heart's healing up. I'm accepting the reality of where we've ended up. And so it's something that is approachable and able to be done sometime, sometime within the next month or 2, I would say. Would you agree with that, Jim? How do you feel?
Yeah, I think so. I think we're probably going to be ready pretty soon here.
Yeah, me too. And my intention is to be pretty organized with that and allow people the opportunity to either call in or to even join us depending on who they are. And that could potentially draw a lot of people into one place. So, maybe we'll do like a extra long episode, like a marathon or something. I don't know, but we'll brainstorm ideas. We'll keep you guys involved in the Discord or other routes.
Maybe see if some of our guests that we had on with Tracy would like to come back and say a few things.
Yeah, anything like that, I'm totally down for it. I just feel like we're just barely starting the healing process enough to bring it to the table. I know that we had a great idea also to eventually make sterling silver coins with the Mount Analog There's More Beyond design. I still love this idea. I want one of these things in my pocket to carry around with me all the time. And, maybe we could even make a full-size one that looks like a silver dollar and then make ones that are the size of a dime, still make them out of silver because that's the metal of the moon. And to me, Tracy Twyman is a representative of the moon. I don't know why, but to me, she's like, that's the energy she was bringing was moon energy. That was my personal feeling always. I don't know if I've ever confessed that to anyone, but she probably wouldn't appreciate me comparing her to a moon child, huh?
Yeah,
even talking about it's giving me a heavy heart. I love you guys. We'll get there together. I've talked to people who are close to me who are experts in grieving because they work in the industry of hospice and other things. And I was thinking to try and find someone who's like a grief counselor and at least me personally consult with them, because I feel like me and you, Jim, we're kind of leading this thing wherever it goes. That's just that's the situation we ended up in because of the circumstances. So if I do find someone, I'll let you know, and maybe me and you'll talk to him together and talk about our own grief and the trauma of it all, and also talk about how we might humbly and intelligently lead whoever wants to come with us on like a journey or a process of grieving and healing from this, because I feel like it's necessary. I feel like I've had everybody waiting on me, but I know that's not really true. That's just my own magnified feelings, because it hurts so much to lose someone you love so unexpectedly. But we're all in this together, you guys. We're gonna make it through it, and please don't hesitate to reach out to each other on the Discord. I've got a lot of private messages from people, and I do try to keep up and at least give a short response. Your participation and your outreach is appreciated beyond what can be described in words. It really means a lot.
Yeah, I agree. We've got some nice words in the comments about Tracy.
I was glancing over here too, and as far as I know, someone said she was a Virgo. Is she a Virgo? Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, maybe we could read some of her work at some point.
Yeah, I mean, the other idea I had, Jim, was like I still want to do one big full-blown memorial show, but after that I was thinking we could have like a memorial minute, where we always read something or we put on a short clip, and it doesn't have to be a minute, but where we always, each episode after we've gone through that process I just described a little ways farther than we are now, to always bring a little tiny piece of Tracy's work back to the show. I feel like in the future that's going to be absolutely necessary, and it's going to be good,
Yeah, I'd like to edit some clips of, some moments when she was on the show, funny things that she said.
Yeah. I'm just now feeling like I can go back and start to look. Up till just the last 3 weeks even, trying to land on any of our stuff and look at it was just heart-wrenching. But I'm almost feeling like I'm hungry to go back and look now, because I miss her. And one way I can not miss her is if I see and hear her face and get some of that really subtle, dry humor. You have to almost extract it like you're drawing something out with a syringe. That's Tracy's humor. You have to, first of all, you have to be smart. If you're stupid, you're not going to get it. But
Yeah, I remember the Ilion Maybe episode that we did. She was wearing that Phrygian hat.
Yeah.
It was all dressed up like a Smurf. It was hilarious. It was sort of a rare look at her sense of humor. She's always so serious.
Yeah, and she brought remember she brought she rubbed ashes on her head for Ash Wednesday. She comes popping into the camera, and here she's got a cross on her forehead, and I don't even know if she went to a church or what, but that's just so funny.
Yeah, hilarious. She was so funny.
But yeah, I'd say, I don't know, I'm pretty good to cut this loose as long as you're all good, man. I can't imagine really going anywhere from this point other than to draw closer to an okay bye. And right now we don't have a scheduled guest or a plan for next week. So if you have an idea of someone you think they'd be willing to come on short notice, please pop it into the recommendations in the Discord server. If the link is expired for the Discord server and you want in, please ask me or Jem in a private message, and we'll find a way to send you a new link. After Tracy passed away, we kind of shut the server, not shut it down, but made it a little bit harder to get in because we were kind of getting flooded. I guess we could start opening it back up, but I feel like that's kind of a conversation not just between me and you, but we have like a core group now of people that have all been involved through this whole process. And I feel like we need eventually to start making decisions as a group, Like we do it already kind of, but I mean, if we could start voting on stuff or, whatever. And I don't want to just throw the thing wide open and we end up with whoever wants to come in. I kind of feel like gaining access through at least asking for an invitation seems fair to me.
I kind of think that it's enough time has passed that it'd be safe to open it back up. There's not going to be a lot of trolls that are looking for that, negative energy of somebody, of a tragedy.
All right, well, let's ask for some help then. Let's do what I said, because I agree too. I'm on the fence, but I agree with you. It's probably safe. So we got 21 people still watching. Please give us a big thumbs up on the, help us beat the YouTube algorithm so that we can be placed in the searches and stuff. And if you think it's okay to open the Discord, please press 1. If you think we should keep it closed and invite only for a while, please press 2. We're going to be watching the chat. So go ahead and press 1 for open 2 for invite only, and let us know what you think so we can see the 1s and 2s going by and make a decision as a group right now. So. Oh, I'm not.
So you say 1, open it, and 2, no?
Yeah, 1, open it. 2, it stays invite only. Yeah, I'm not. Maybe people don't want to vote.
Take a minute.
Oh, there's a 1 for Jim.
That's me.
Cody says 2, and I know she's in there. Oh, it's a dead heat, folks. It's tied. Krista's voting 1. You know what? Honestly, I think it's okay. I'm gonna vote 1. So unless we get a bunch of 2s rolling in, then I'll change the description in the link in the description right now. I'll create a new Discord link that will not expire, and I will put it at the very bottom of the comments in the show that we are in right now. Because we're seeing enough 1s. There's not enough people going to vote to knock that down. So let's see. I'll do it right this minute so we don't forget. Invite people. And let's see. Edit the invite link. Expires after never. And the maximum number of users, I guess we'll just say 100 if 100 more people want to jump in on this link. Copy. Okay, so here's the link. It didn't work. Oh, there we go. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Sorry, hold on. Let me do a better job for you guys here. Okay, there's the link, and it will also, this link, you can let people know if they're wanting into the Discord, if people hear people talking about it or are interested. The most recent show, the very, very bottom, where it says we're also on Discord, it will work now. And they're all 3 the same link. I just saw somebody else do that, and I'm copying them, so.
All right.
All right.
Back to open.
We're open for business again, folks.
I know some people left the Discord after, the last few months, and probably could be ready to come back.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean, and I really encourage people that are still watching the show. If you had to take time away, we totally understand, but we all went through this together, so we're a group now that, whether we like it or not, we're a group now. We're all together, and we need each other's love, support. We need each other's open trust and everything. I don't got no hard feelings or I'm not butthurt. I'm pretty happy that I feel like we all managed as well as we could despite the horrible experience we've gone through together. So good job for one thing to everybody. Jim, thanks for being a good friend. Thanks for going through this with me.
I kind of withdrew my shock reaction into things to serious loss like this. So I kind of just fell out of all my interneting, social media, just hard. And then it becomes a thing, it just, I'm ready to get back into it.
Yeah. And, I feel like I'm just now starting to I did that too. I just kind of threw myself into safe subjects. Like I went back to reading my Bible a lot and listening to a lot of apocryphal 1970 instead of listening to any conspiracy shows. And that's just always what I do. If I have something really hard or difficult happen, I always just kind of go back to what I taught myself or what I was taught when I was young, which is to lean on God, to lean on support yourself by letting the scriptures talk to you, and it's worked good for me, But I also feel like maybe it is time to get ahead of ourselves on this show again, start scheduling and being more planned, having a little bit more of an outline. maybe get the studio changed around and get back in one place, or all that kind of stuff. So
I kind of like this earlier time slot that we're on. I feel like we've got the possibility of maybe even doing a longer show at some points if.
no, yeah, that way if we have Harrison come on and he wants to go on all night long about the second iteration of Gnostic cosmology, or we could get him and Stephen Sorensen on together, and Sorensen can throw some Latin at him, and Harrison could translate it on the fly.
That'd be awesome.
That kind of stuff. So yeah, I'm gonna stick with 4:30 for the new start time, as long as you're okay with that, Jim. Let's just plan on that. I feel good. It's nice that it's early and we're almost done.
Yeah.
So
I'm glad that you all that live over there in the East Coast aren't having to wreck there tomorrow to be able to participate in the chat.
We appreciate it, but we don't want you to have to do that anymore. So we finally pulled the trigger and said, "Hey, let's change this up." So.
Yeah. I'm just hopeful that everybody can find us at this new time. I think they will.
Oh, it'll work out.
A lot of people today that were the regulars, which would make me happy seeing all you guys. For sure.
All right. I was gonna try one more search and then we're gonna let it go here. Ah, darn. Oh well.
What's your?
I searched pine cone versus pineapple. I was hoping that they'd get us a picture of a pine cone and a pineapple like holding pocket knives out at each other, but there's nothing good. So.
I remember you started out when you were on Worski Live, and Andy Worski and Jeff, JF Garapi, they were starting to get they started to have some disagreements, and they had a safe word that they were going to tell each other before they got mad, and their safe word was pineapple.
That's right. There's a pineapple meme somewhere. Okay, now here I'm going to switch this over to the screen here, Jim. It'll take a second to get to you. Oh, it's kind of blocked up here. Hold on, let me bring it back so I can move it to where you can see here. So this, after searching a little bit more, this picture came up, and I'll describe it in case it's a little fuzzy on the screen. So this appears to be a gentleman wearing a hoodie, and he's karate chopping someone that looks like the chef in the eye and punching him with a pineapple at the same time. The chef is losing a tooth. The man has a pentagram tattooed on the back of his right hand. There's another guy fighting another chef behind him. This is a good representation of where we might go any given picture show. So, can you see that thing or not?
Just showed up. You might want to slide it over a tad bit because it's kind of right.
Oh no, I move it. It's if you're that far behind, I move it in just a second.
Yeah.
So.
Well, yeah. He says pineapple.
I wonder where. Oh, it's on DeviantArt, of course. Oh, hold on. Let's fade that over. That could be a pretty risky click there. We can't have the DeviantArt homepage.
I can't remember if it was in the. I think I saw it in the chat, but I can't remember if you guys were talking about it. But somebody said that pineapple was a code that swingers use. Did you hear that?
No.
Talking to Steven. Yeah, that's what someone said. They use it as a sort of an identifier, I guess, or something.
So
I never heard it.
Yeah, that's it. I like the idea of continuing the pineapple adventure forever. I love the idea of Stephen Sorensen having it be his first book to publish because it's an easy one. Not like the entire chronology of the world, but instead Pine Cones and Pineapples in Pompeii would be a good book. And I'd be glad to help him with that. But I'm going to read you the description of this picture, Jim. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay, it says pine cone with a pineapple. And then it says, pine cone has a knack for turning anything he can get his hands on into a deadly weapon. This includes fruit. Pine cone is taking care of some nasty chefs in a shady restaurant. So there you go. The man's name is Pine Cone. And he's attacking a chef with a pineapple.
I love pine trees. Love apples. Love pineapples.
Pine nuts? You ever eat pine nuts?
Pine nuts?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Is it like you mean like from the pine cone?
Yeah,
Pine nuts?
that's what comes out. Yeah, that's where you get them. They're not easy to get, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I don't know if I've ever had them.
Oh, you probably have. They usually serve them in. They come with something. They're what real pesto is made with pine nuts. Like now, a lot of people will use pumpkin seeds instead, but true high quality pesto is made with pine nuts. And there's something else they put it in, but they're really expensive. We used to buy a lot of them because I used to make a lot of foods for my buddy in the wheelchair that included pine nuts. And if I pulled let's just say back then I used to maybe smoke some marijuana. It was a long time ago, but I would pull the pine nuts down and we'd have a big bag of them. They're like $18 a pound, And I would sit there and eat a few and eat a few. And after about the fifth time I reach into the bag, my buddy would say, "Hey, put those things away. They're too expensive. You can't just eat them by the handful,
I bet it takes a long time to shell a pine cone.
I was trying to see if there was a picture that shows how to harvest pine nuts.
Do they look like the shape of corn with like a little pokey on them?
Oh, I didn't push the button over here. Yeah, here it'll give us another 8 seconds and it'll be up on the screen here.
You have a picture of them. Interesting. I always kind of thought that they'd be. I've seen what I thought were little seeds in small pine cones I found, but I've never got them to sprout or anything. I wasn't sure if they were mature.
Oh, you might have to shell them. Maybe that's what this is saying. Well, we're going to end this show by talking about how to harvest pine nuts, and I'll just read some of this article, and then we're going to move along. So pine nuts make a healthy, delicious treat, especially if you harvest them yourself. While harvesting pine nuts takes time and effort, it's easier once you know the right technique. By picking and drying the pine cones and shelling the nuts, you'll have plenty of pine nuts. Once you've harvested your pine nuts, you'll be able to store them, eat them raw, or use them in a variety of dishes. So you go pick a pine cone. You harvest before the pine cone opens. You take the cone off the tree. It says here you take them and you let them sit home for 21 days. Dry the pine cones in a burlap bag for 21 days. They need 3 weeks to dry before you can harvest the nuts inside. Place the cones in a burlap bag or similar in the sun. Leave them sitting in the sun for 3 weeks, Don't stack them taller than 2 deep. Tie the bag shut so you don't get robbed by animals. The fifth step, roast the pine cones as a quicker alternative to air drying. So if you don't want to be patient, you can stick them in the oven. I highly recommend against this step because it kills all the micronutrients and the beneficial flora and fauna or other things that might be in there. That's not the right words. Flora and fauna, that's not right.
I'm way too impatient to wait 21 days for my pine nuts.
I understand. Okay, it's looking like they want you to get your gardening gloves because it's a pretty sappy job. You pick the nuts out by pulling the thing apart and getting them out from between each little segment. If they float, it's no good. If they sink, it's good. You want to throw away the floaters. And then you got to shell them. So yeah, there's no wonder they're so expensive.
Yeah, that's a lot of work.
That's work. I bet they haven't invented a machine that does that either. The machine that does that is a human's hands. That's
yeah. They fly them to Indonesia to find cheap laborers.
I'm sure they do. Yeah, see, and then you throw them on a salad. No, I saw a little clip, to be off topic for just a second, I saw a clip about cashews and how the plant they harvest them from is full of acid. And the women over there in India are they're working their butts off to just barely get any money at all, like not even close to $1 a day, I don't think. And their hands are just ruined from picking the cashews.
Wow, could you imagine that? They only make $7 a week.
Pick cashews all day, every day until your fingers are eaten alive by acid and you get $1 a day, maybe.
I mean, maybe the the cost of living is cheaper over there, but still, that's not nearly any money.
No, it got my brain thinking when I saw that clip, because I mean, we buy cashews, and obviously one family just saying we're not going to buy them, it doesn't really make a difference. But I do have a creative mind of thinking like, well, how can we help these women? Maybe we can't get them out of their job, but you know. But,
Remember that girl in Dr. Phil? She was all cashew outside. Whoosh. Catch me outside. Whoosh.
That was a good transition to the end of the show, though, because I got to go pee again. So, hey, we're at 3 minutes and 11 seconds. So, in honor of that crappy band 311, hey, I know some people like them. I'm just kidding. We're gonna go ahead and say, okay, bye.
Okay,
Everybody
bye.
say, okay, bye.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.